G'day, killer bosses. AOS coach here, and we are talking all things Orruk Warclans, but not any type of Orruk Warclans. The cruel summer that is the Kruleboyz, and I'm joined by Jacob Brandon from the Bottom Table Bullies, being a great Kruleboy performer, a consistent top table Kruleboy performer. You went second at the Nova Open. You went sixth at Basement Wargamers. Was it Summer Slaughter?
Summer Slaughter, yes.
And you've represented Kruleboyz consistently for a while. And while you haven't got anything new from the Dawnbringers book, although you did get a new Underworlds warband coming soon or already out,
half and half.
Yeah, it's coming. I don't recall exactly when it comes out, but we want to revisit Kruleboyz in Generals Handbook 2023. Where do we stand? How are you making the most of it, given that you came second at the Nova Open, which is an incredibly competitive field and had a lot of great players? And how are you thinking about the Primal Dice and the Antorian Acolytes and the Wizard meta and how Gobsprak is currently king? And let's talk Kruleboyz. Let's talk about the often forgotten about Orruk Warclans, although Bone Splitters might have a thing to say. But Jacob, welcome. Introduce yourself for the people who don't know who you are.
So I'm Jacob. I've been playing Warhammer for like 11 years now. I came on the show once for Skaven, and I was a big ETC player back in the day when ETC was around. I played in the US circuit for Fantasy, and now after COVID, I got back into AOS, and I've been playing since.
Why Kruleboyz? And why did you jump from Skaven to Kruleboyz?
So we've been doing team events, me and my friends, for a long time, and Kruleboyz were always one of the team picks we had, because we always thought that a gunline shooting army that did mortals was really important for teams. And back in the first couple editions of Warhammer with it, it was okay. It wasn't the best thing in the world. But we've always had it like in the back of our minds up until now. And I think with this new GHB, they finally hit a good spot with all the buffs that have happened over the time. The Antorian update that we got back in last September, I believe, and all the little things have finally like accumulated up to the point where I do think they're really good, and they've been performing really well across the US and I think a little bit of Europe too.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because when they very first came out the gates, they were very oddly pointed. I remember Gut Rippers being, was it like 180 or something?
They were like 180, yeah.
Ridiculous. They were off the charts. You know, your Grot Shaman, your Hobgrots couldn't be battle line. There were so many things that were really off. Gobsprak was like 320 or 380 or something absolutely absurd. And there's been a number of changes, both from points, but also, as you said, battle scrolls, battle line if. There's been enough changes where the win rate and the representation rate seems to have increased from what has been consistently bottom table for a long time to now, according to Warhammer stats, you're at the 48% mark in this current season. So you're in that kind of sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. And it was nice because back when they came out, I believe it was like 40% for a very long time. It was, I think they were either first at the bottom or close to it, like bottom three for the last 3 years that they've been out, or 2 years, 2.5. So it's really nice to actually get a little bit of upward momentum.
Yeah, it was always like this one-trick pony of big yellers. It was just like have the shooting castle, blitz your opponent off the board with the extra range, and if you did enough damage, you won. If not, the win rate kind of crumbled. But talk to me through how are we going with the season in 2023. You've obviously done incredibly well, as we mentioned, Nova Open, Basement Wargamers, and many other events. How are you finding them for season 2023?
So one of the biggest thing I've told people is the cast values for a lot of the things the Kruleboyz do is a 7 or a 6. 7s are really hard to rely on for casters, and the extra primal dice that have been coming in because of the season have been huge, because the Kruleboyz have some of the best spells in the game, in my opinion. They have a lot of board-wide spells. They have huge AoE spells. Turning off wards is another amazing spell. And you have one of the best casters in the game right now because of Gobsprak's ability at turning off other people's casting, doing damage, threatening little wizards. So this season has highly benefited them in little ways that have, I think, helped them more than everybody else in the field. And that's helped cover the distance, along with all the changes they've gotten over the years. So it's been point by point by point, and we finally hit the critical mass that we needed. So
it's not like there's been this massive one update in like a battle scroll that's changed the game. It feels like, to your point, it's been incremental changes over the course of 18 months, 2 years. And we finally, as you said, crossed this threshold. And for some people who are listening to this, they might have a Dominion box sitting on their shelf like I am right now, looking up there, and I've never touched my Kruleboyz, never touched them. And it's a royal shame because as a model, they're awesome. They are such a gritty looking force full of great detail. They remind me of the orcs from Lord of the Rings as opposed to the cartoony style, which is maybe more of the Iron Jaws kind of aesthetics. Yet it's a royal shame that you don't see a lot of them on the table. So I'm hoping through this discussion whether we re-inspire people to pick them up and put them back on the table, or maybe you're like me and you've got them sitting in a box up there, never been touched. Maybe it's time to get out the gut rippers. Maybe it's time out to go build a breaker boss and start getting cruel.
They are a ton of fun to play. They have a lot of mobility, a lot of flexibility, and it's a lot of in-game decisions, even with some of their list building. Even though the list building is a little bit shallow, that means the gameplay is going to open up where you can shine.
Great segue, because where I was going to set you up is I wanted to ask you, for someone like me who literally has not unpacked their box and never played with their Kruleboyz, how would you describe their play style? Because I could play them as Big War. So if I am an Iron Jaws player and I'm like, I want to bring some shooting into my list and I want to bring a little bit diversity or a different play style, there's the Big War element. But as a Kruleboy faction, how does it operate and how is it different to, say, maybe some of the other destruction builds, whether it's Gits, whether it's Gargants, whether it's your Iron Jaws? What are they good at, and maybe what are some of the weaknesses that I should be considering?
So one of the most interesting things I've learned from playing them is, unlike other destruction armies, destruction is usually the tempo army that wants to set the precedent. They want to be in your face. They want to be doing all the damage. They want to set the pace of the game. Iron Jaws were famous for boxing you into your deployment on turn one with the pig charge. Gits are famous for bringing back squigs, shoving them in your face. Giants are 4 giants coming across the board real quick at you. They don't have much other option, but that's what they do. Kruleboyz are actually kind of a mid-range army where you're not usually going to win big unless your opponent decides that the game is going to be a win big game. Most of my wins are almost always a 3 to 4 point win. And same with the losses. The losses are usually going to be very small because of that play style. So that's a big play style shift, I think, from a lot of destruction players' perspective.
Yeah, it's like whenever I think of Kruleboyz, I always think of like Lumineth, I think of Seraphon, I think of Tzeentch, I think of other armies that are a lot more techy, a lot more decision making, a lot more strategic, and it's going to reward you for the full duration of the 3 games, as opposed to my Gargants, which is my plan is to move forward, step on a circle, be better than you stepping on circles, stop you from stepping on my circle, and trying to not die.
Mm-hmm.
Or like my Gits, where my Gits, to be fair, my Gits are probably very similar, right? Like there's just a bunch of idiots that want to stand on a circle. But for you, you don't have the horde. Well, you don't really have the horde. You don't have the ultimate killy monsters.
Yeah.
You don't have these super durable mega heroes that come to life. But what you've got is incredible amount of techie pieces. You've got units that trade up incredibly well. And you have elements to play throughout the game. You've got wizards. You've got shooting. You've got hand-to-hand. You've got monsters. You've got buff pieces. You've got a little bit of everything, which kind of allows you to your point, compete and not blow out your games, but also not be blown out of the water if played correctly. And I think that's a learning curve.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest learning curve. I think for a lot of newer players too, is most of destruction has really high wound counts with Gits or Iron Jaws where they have the armor to back it up. Giants are a little bit different again. They kind of skew out, but Kruleboy wound values are actually really low across the board. Same with armor. They don't really have any armor and they don't have wards. So every wound you take is actually pretty bad at the long run. We don't rally any special way. It's really more about where you can pick your fights and you need to trade effectively. Now you trade really effectively, like you said, doing mortals is one of the best trading pieces in the game, and you're almost always going to beat something offensively pound to pound because of that. But you can't really take a beating back.
How have you found them in the current meta with, the rise of Khorne and Seraphon and Slanesh and OBR and Soulblight probably leading the meta right now? How are you feeling Kruleboy responds to those types of armies at the top tables?
So at the top tables, I think it's always about getting the damage to where it needs to go. You're not a quantity army, you're a quality army at the end of the day. So finding the pieces where you can find picks and make plays where you can kill the things that you need to kill is more important at the end of the day. You have a lot of killing battle tactics and plans. You can take Crumple Maul to knock your opponent down to less than 3 units at the end of the game. So even though you are very precise, you still want to be killing as much as you can. You want to get every single damage point you can every single turn.
It always feels like you are a scalpel army where you are taking people out piece by piece, understanding where the critical threats are, reducing them through mortal wounds or deleting them completely so that when they get to you, it's not an overwhelming attack from your opponent, but rather it's a very much, you've crippled them, you've hurt them, you've shut down keep. Because that's one of my challenges, right? As a Gits player or as a Gargant player, I don't have a lot of range. I don't have a lot of tech. Being able to do, is it the choking mist?
Choking
little
mist,
AO. That's a great spell. Being able to deflect and not be targeted from certain areas. There's a lot of little tech pieces that, as a Gits player, I would absolutely love, but we can't have them all, right?
Yeah, Kruleboyz don't really have a bad matchup right now, but they're also not a great matchup into anything. Because you have the answers to everything, you're sacrificing elsewhere where you're going to be like, well, I wish I could just do a little bit more, and sometimes you're going to fall flat. But you always have that option to fall on.
Do you have any favorite units right now in the game, whether they are just incredible in this current season or something that maybe in the last season wasn't that good, but whether it's points changes, whether it's rule adjustments, they've just gone from average to great?
So nobody else plays this, and I don't understand why. The killer boss on Corpse Ripper Vulture is probably one of my favorite models that no one else plays. It's a 14-inch move monster that does decent damage. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. But it can also take Fasten, so it plays like a very cheap Maw Crusher. But because of that, you have a lot of flexibility with that. Double stand and shoot, which is possible because of him also, is also really, really, really good in Kruleboyz and can win you just some games flat out.
And it's only 200 points.
It's only 200 points. Yeah.
Wow. I remember when this very first came out, and I remember looking at Gobsprak versus the killer boss on the Vulture, and I'm like, I'm going Gobsprak every time, but even Gobsprak was just crazy expensive. 200 points. That's a steal.
200 points for a monster that can fly 28 inches on the turn that you really need it to, and then charge. And will do pretty good damage into most things, and then just be there. And it's a utility piece on the side, too. And this is, again, where I was talking about where the Kruleboyz kind of do a little bit of everything. Yeah, the double issue of CP is really, really cool, but you kind of lose some of your combat potential for doing that, and it's so cheap. So it's not like an obvious just, I'm going to shove and it's always going to kill the thing I need it to. It's more, when do I explode? When do I look for plays? Where do I look for picks? And then finding that answer there.
Any other units? I mentioned Gobsprak, for example, and talking to other people who are allying Gobsprak in, they love what it's bringing to the meta right now.
So it's probably not my favorite unit, but I think it has gotten good, and it's kind of seen its light of day as the Ballista, the Beast Skewer Killbow. I don't think it's got anything super special behind it, but it's just gotten so cheap And it's so scary to have something that just sits there and looks at you, and it's like, I could just do 12 randomly.
It's
And
80 points.
yeah, it's 80 points. I had it, my two OBR games, one time it did hit Catacross for 12, and that is just like out of nowhere, and it's very hard to account for. And in other games, it's just going to miss every turn. But it's 80 points doing that. So if you get it to shoot twice and do like 6 damage each time, it's perfectly great.
I may or may not end this stream and immediately go buy a Man-skewer killer bow for my gits. That for 80 points, sitting on a home field objective, sniping out heroes and not caring about lookout, sir, doing an incredible amount of mortal wounds with your 24 inch range or 12 if you get a little closer, and there's obviously 2 different profiles. 80 points is a steal.
Mm-hmm. Actually, even though the Kruleboyz can't play it, I think the Regiment of Renown, which is the 6 Bolt Boys plus that, the Man-skewer Killbow, I play all those things in my army naturally, and you get those at a 40-point discount, I believe, in the other destruction armies. I think that is a great ally to put in your army.
Love it. I love it. This is. I'm getting excited. This is really cool. Although I might not be starting a whole Kruleboy army, these points adjustments are incredible.
It's amazing in gets love a little bit of shooting to help them out, but it's just really annoying to go kill.
What are some of the other hot takes that you've got? I don't want to turn this into the Git show because I'm gonna deviate that way. But like, what else are you liking as a Kruleboy player? Because obviously, your Man-skewer Bolt Boys, have they been negatively impacted with the changes to Lookout Sir? Or even has something become better because of coherency changing from 5 to 6?
Yes, the Bolt Boys highly benefited again from the 5 to 6 change. They've always been good. So the rest of the army is good, and it's always been there. The profile isn't super deep on what you can take. There's only 3, or I guess 4 now with the Warcry Warband, 4 units that you can take in the game besides the Man-skewer bow, and then the rest is monsters and characters. So there's not a super deep roster to play with, and everything else has seen its light of day because it's either battle line or it's the shooting or it's the monsters. I can go over the things I don't like. It's probably a shorter list. I think the foot heroes that aren't the wizards are really struggling and need a little bit of an overhaul. The killer boss on foot is okay, but melee heroes have always not been too great, and Kruleboyz really suffer from that also. We're not a brawling army. We don't want to be fighting for more than 1 turn on our engagement. So characters like that aren't too great. And then the anti-magic banner is also not amazing. The range on it is a little bit too short to implement correctly. And then everything else sees play. So it's only about 6 other units. Bolt Boys will always be good. Gut Rippers are your battle line. You have to take them. Hobgrots are great at dying. They do what they do. And then you fill in your roster with your shamans and your melee characters and Gobsprack.
Speaking of the Hobgrots, I know this was a change that happened a while ago, but how impactful was the Gut Ripper change to allow for a Hobgrot unit to be battle line, the 1-for-1 element?
So that was actually really important because my current lists wouldn't work if that was not the case. One of the big problems I have with this game and what determines whether an army is really good or not is usually battle line condition. When you have to pay 500 points for battle line you don't want to take, it is really, really rough on your army. And that is like one of the baseline decisions for like a good army versus a bad army. And this is the Slanesh problem that they've been seeing for a long time with the Bliss Barbs and stuff like that. You can see it when people are like, I don't want to take anything else because my battle line sucks. And that really puts a damper on my list as a whole. So Gut Rippers for a long time were terrible. They were 180 points like we talked about. Their -1 to hit was conditional on a bravery check of the opponent, which is already way too many senses for a roll. And then you were either playing that or Big Yellers, and that's why Big Yellers were the only playable thing for a long time, was because it opened up the Bolt Boy battle line. So taking bad battle line is always a really big misstep at the beginning, and having that 80-point unit be a battle line slot was huge.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, if you can move your mic back near your mouth after you coughed, just in case we lose all that great wisdom that you just dropped. Long story short, good change. If the audio didn't quite come through just then.
Gotcha.
No. Just it got a little bit faint just after
Oh, okay, gotcha.
how dare you cough? How
I know.
very,
The dry
very,
air.
very rude. But like that's probably one of the other challenges I had when I very first looked at Kruleboyz. Took too much gits already. Kruleboyz is the fact that you had to pay for gut rip attacks outside of big yellers, and they were too expensive. They're not even cheap like Liberators, which was their equivalent. I air quote here, but like they were the equivalent. But like I can use 3 units of Liberators, and Stormcast have a million options for battle line.
Mhm.
I'm glad that Pot-grots are actually a battle line option now. I think it does open up some extra points for you and a little bit extra list variety.
And you do want one. I think one Pot-grot is actually super valuable. Whereas before, when you only had the 3 gut rippers to fill in, the gut rippers would have to do because you just couldn't afford them.
No, there was no points for the Pot-grots, and you've seen them be good allies, but also they're good, screens. They're good options to go score objectives, to take on early, leave them on home objectives.
Surround is a great option for them to go run off and handle their business. I play a lot of WoW now for the Grand Strat, and it's very nice to have an 80-point unit that can just run up the side of the board, be like, "Don't look at me. I'm gonna go score 3 points."
And you know what? If people target your Pot-grots as opposed to everything else in your army, that's a win. That is a win. If they target your Pot-grots because they're concerned of them for some reason, you're laughing because the damage not going into other areas. But if they ignore it, great. There's things I can do with it. So it's win-win.
Yeah.
There were some other changes, and I've been waiting to bring this up. A couple of other changes. So this is Battle Scroll and Tour from September 2023. There's a couple of key changes for you as a Kruleboyz player. I might let you kind of take over here. So what have we got here? We've got, first off, we have a new battle tactic, which is this is the tweak of the battle tactic first. So change the first sentence of the Dirty Tricks battle trait 2 after the players have received their starting command points, but before the start of your first turn. You can pick 2 different dirty tricks to employ during the battle. What's that change, and has it been impactful?
So it was a huge impact because you used to only be able to choose one. The dirty tricks are all very useful. There's 4 of them. One is -1 to wound, turn 1. Very, very good. It's one I always take. After that, you have 3 more. They are all conditional on a roll. The problem with the dirty tricks before was because of that conditionality, you would often just miss. It was lethal surprise, which is more invisibility. More invisibility is okay. That's very matchup dependent. And because you get to choose this at the start of the matchup, you can decide whether or not that's valuable or not. If they have shooting, you take it. If they don't, then you don't care. Disappearing Act is also another very cool aggression tool. I have won several games because if you have the ability to choose priority and you pick up your opponent's screens, you can really put them in a weird position, and it makes deploying very difficult. My favorite thing is the Saurus Guard for the Croak and the Slann. That is a great pickup, and then all of a sudden that Slann is all alone, and he's going to get blasted or picked up by something. Same with Croak. That is a devastating pickup that they have no ability to really handle. And then lastly is, I said Lethal Surprise. I meant Covered in Mud for the visibility. Lethal Surprise with the trapping objectives in terrain. It's okay. I think it's pretty hard to implement correctly. Some of the games are going to go the way you think it will. Sometimes they'll never go near it, and that's just the way the game plays out. If you get to do D6 Mortals once or twice, it's a great bonus, but I think the -1 to wound and then picking up units are by far the 2 most impactful. And then if I don't have anything good to pick up, I'll take Lethal Surprise to trap something and hope to do a little bit of extra damage.
The Disappearing Act has always been the one that I've really most enjoyed. And because you're right, you can take away those critical screens that are protecting your Slann, for example, or that juicy unit that's protecting the Lord of Change for any castles. And there are a lot of castles right now. But equally, you can take away that key buff hero right? You can do
You
heroes.
have
It's
to
just units.
roll equal to or higher than their wounds, so you're going to have risk with
So if you got a
characters.
so if you got a 5 wound hero, there is a chance on a 6 you can. It's equal to or better, right? I'm just rereading
It's
the.
better.
Okay, so it's not even equal. You've got to.
Mhm.
It's greater than the wounds characteristic. So if you do have a critical unit, let's say for example you and I are playing, and I've got the unit of squigs. If you really want to get rid of the squig boss behind the scenes, you could go for the 6, but you'd probably more likely go for the squig unit with their 2 wounds, which
Yeah.
is a
Well,
little bit easier.
for units like that, I'll probably pick the damage. So if you see huge units, I think Lethal Surprise is much better because then they're more likely to proc it. And then if you hit like 3d6 mortals, that's a lot on especially a big unit. Now you probably only get like 1 or 2, and if they hit it, cool, but it's free damage. And then the Disappearing Act is much more if you're going to be aggressive, if you're going to be the one to now set the pace, or if there's an objective that they have taken and you want to pick them up to get a more point early, that's also crucial.
The challenge is though that the unit can't be reinforced. So if I had 24 squig, and that's kind of why I brought up the hero option, was because if I had my 24 units of squig herd, that is a reinforced unit, so it's not being picked. So it doesn't mean I can't focus on it. I could go for the hero, and yeah, it's a little bit harder to do, but removing that critical hero from that unit will pull me back return. It'll change the way I play on the table. And yeah, it's a roll of a 6, but I guess it's better than nothing.
Having the second option is always huge because before it was now I don't get to do this, and now it's this could happen, and if it does, it completely changes the game.
Yeah, when you only had one option, I found people would just go for Noisy Racket because it's consistent and it's for everyone. Now you can do 2. You can still do Noisy Racket and roll the dice. And you know what? If you don't get many good Disappearing Acts off, at least you've still got Noisy Racket.
Yeah.
Cool. I couldn't remember if it was D3, and that's kind of why I had to throw it over to you. I'm like,
Yeah.
was it D3 Dirty Tricks? I remember there was something.
Only one. Yeah, it was
one,
just a flat one, and because it's 4-ups for each of them, all the other 3, so that's why.
As if you'd risk a 4-up on your one ability. Like, I've got one dirty trick. Let's go for a 4-up. Oh, I rolled a 3. Great, I get nothing.
Yeah.
Good change. What else you got there? So you've got the Grin and Blades changed out of the Mist ability to friendly Grin and Blades units that are not visible to enemy units that are more than 12 inches away from them.
And this was another huge change. So this is actually my favorite faction, and this is why I like to play them as much. So the Grinning Blades ability used to just be first turn, which is still really good. It was good anti-shooting turn 1, or good anti-aggression turn 1. The change, though, lets you play very cagey games against other people that are also cagey. Seraphon cagey, Zentress cagey, any type of shooting. I played the Daughters of Cain, Marathian the Bow Snakes, very cagey. And now that they're only being able to see you 12 away, now it's going to be a lot of jockeying. It's going to be a lot of positional games. It becomes a much more in-depth game of chicken, which is a lot of fun to play for you because you're going to set the pace for it.
So what does it mean, right? So you and I are playing, for example, let's say it's I'm playing my Cities of Sigmar, bunch of idiots walking up the table, a little bit of shooting, a little bit of combat, a little bit of cavalry. What does it mean to be able to not be picked from more than outside of 12 inches?
So the big thing is spells and target abilities. So shooting is a target ability. If you're not within 12, you cannot be picked to be shot. So this is what Ideneth, I think, really, really excelled at back in the day, is they made it very awkward for people to shoot them. So it was very good to be anti-shooting. Kruleboyz, because it's just 12 for everything, makes it awkward for magic and awkward for shooting. There's a lot of things in the game right now that really, really love to shoot you from safety or do damage from safety. Doing damage from safety is the best thing to do because you can't get hit back. So what the Kruleboyz player does is it's like, now if you want to get engaged with me, you're going to be close enough that I'm going to get a hold of you next turn. KO is another prime example. KO loves to teleport. They love to be at medium range and shoot you so they still feel safe, but they get to do a lot of damage. Now you're like, no. If you're going to teleport and shoot me, you're going to be 12 away. And that means after I move, it's going to be a very reasonable chance I get a hold of you and I'm going to kill everything. And that is a huge change in the style of game you're going to play. Same for Zinch, same for Lumineth. All these games change drastically if now they're like, I have to be danger close to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out because it's fascinating. And I've been playing around with this a little bit with having my general as a spellcasting savant. And in my Gits army, I've got a little fungoid cave shaman. And you're probably sick of me talking about Gits at this point, but this actually is a relevant reason I'm bringing it up, is it can't naturally be targeted unless you're within 12 inches regardless. So it's basically this allegiance ability on one model. So even if I'm just running around trying to protect my general, it's a great way to avoid, as you said, being targeted. Now, if an opponent still has like an area of effect where, let's say, for example, the Celestant Prime comes down, points his scepter within 24 inches, or Annihilators come down and everything within a certain range takes damage, I get targeted. It's just an area of effect. But if it's a wizard or it's like long strikes or if it's something from range trying to target a unit, hero or not, that is a great little protection piece. And to get into range means that you can return serve.
Mm-hmm. And this was also a big thing. I used to play the Skaven, and I loved the Deceiver. The Deceiver had the same type of rule where he could not be shot if you were more than 9 away. And that was more impactful in more of my games than I could ever recall for a single model not being able to get targeted. Those types of things, and especially when it's across the board, is a huge change and a huge sweeping way and you have to play. And it also breaks your opponent's sequence. So a lot of people, when they play this game, you learn your army, you learn what to do, you know how to play your army to the maximum ability. Kruleboyz disrupt that very, very well, and it puts your opponent off pace for how they should handle you. And you need to do it because you are a squishy army at the end of the day.
And that's where I wanted to move us towards, is the fact that when you're moving up and advancing up the board, you don't have the best armor saves. You aren't a very, you're a squishy army. So any damage you can mitigate as you advance up the board is only going to be a good thing for you.
Mm-hmm. And the play style that it plays is it's not actually an incredibly shovey army either. It is a slow slog army. Some of your models are very fast. The buzzards are very fast. But if you move forward, you're going to leave the rest of your army behind. Same with the Nashtus. The Sludge Raker is only movement 8, so he's not outpacing those foot guys too much. But there's a very reasonable plan to just kind of move the block forward, take board control, and as you're doing it, not get blasted off the board.
Yeah, you are a very slow advancing army. Even like the Marsh Crawler, like I played around with that. I'm like, oh, you only move 6. Like, It's just a lot of. By the way, I don't think Kruleboyz has ever taken a Marsh Crawler. It's like everyone's favorite ally. It just never gets taken in Kruleboyz. Couple of other good quality of life changes, and then I'll acknowledge the battle tactic like I tried to at the start, but I got sidetracked by that delicious dirty tricks rule. One that I'm a massive fan of, and I hope you are too, is obviously the Swamp Caller Shaman and removing that line, because I always hated that you had to choose one or the other. It made no sense because you were paying a premium for this model.
Yeah, the Swamp Callers are very reasonable the way they are now. They feel fair, they feel like support pieces, and they feel like wizards. 100 points for the one thing that gave out either a buff or cast a spell was really, really bad. This is another just small change that Kruleboyz needed, and it's finally gotten there with all the buildups of these, where the Swamp Caller feels where it should. It doesn't feel amazing, it feels very fair.
Yeah. And I don't think I ever really saw anyone cast a spell with it until this rule change. It was always like you're using the poisons to get the mortal wound trigger. Very rarely. And like it's an interesting spell, that Summon Boggy Mist, even without looking at the spell lore. There's some interesting things there already.
Mm-hmm. And the Kruleboyz spells are all amazing, but doing mortals more double what you used to is more amazing. And also, this was another callback to pre GHB23. Rolling 7s is hard sometimes. You don't always roll 7s. So having all your casts be on 7s, where you're like, I'm going to take a 50-50. Instead, I could just auto do the poison. I'm just going to do the poison.
Last change, and then we'll go to the battle tactic, is the Gut Rippers. So subtract 1 from hit rolls for targets made with melee weapons by enemy units that are not a hero or a monster that targets. So -1 to be hit, melee only. Does this change the value or the how you play with Gut Rippers?
This was a great change because before it was you roll versus the enemy's bravery with 2 dice. If you beat them, they were -1 to hit. Bravery in this game is usually 7 or better, and if you're playing death, it's 10s. So this almost never came up, and also it was unreliable because, again, you're going to have to roll and determine if you even got this roll. Whereas now it's an easy thing to plan around. You're like, hey, this isn't a monster, this isn't a hero, you're just going to be -1 to hit. And this also pairs very well with the -1 to wound from Noisy Racket. So the whole point of this is your Gut Ripper screen turn 1, and you have a defensive line that is probably going to be -1 to hit, -1 to wound turn 1 that can do some mortals back to you. So this is, again, the deterrent that you need to fend off the shove armies like Iron Jaws, to fend off Stormcast turn 1. It gives just enough math change where it's like, hey, you might not kill me, and if you don't kill me, I'm going to really hurt you back.
Do you think Gut Rippers are still a little bit too expensive at 150?
They're probably a little bit too expensive, but they are close. I mean, they went from 180 to 150 now. This rule got updated. There are a lot of changes that benefited them, and because of all of that, I think they're finally reasonable. I don't mind my Gut Rippers. They have been fine for the games I've played. I've never been super impressed with them, but I've never been upset with them either. It is a 150-point unit that's 20 wounds with a 5 up, -1 to hit, and -1 to wound. Everything's -1 to wound turn 1, so I guess it's a little unfair. But the -1 to hit does fend off a lot of the shove armies turn 1.
Yeah, I was going to say, being that it's two wounds each, so 20 wound unit for 150 points, you can get that -1 to hit. It does have a save of 5 up, unfortunately, so it's not as tanky, but it's not bad. It's not a bad wound trade, but
I would love to see them come down like 10 more points, and I think they'd be perfect. They're not far, though. Not
+1 bravery with the banner, +1 attack from the hero, +1 to charge if you've got the musician. Okay, it's not too bad.
Yeah, it's all so close, and it's reasonable. So it's not like, oh, this is horrendous, which is always the thing that I look for where I'm playing with stuff where I'm like, this is just bad. But I don't say that about them. I think they're good.
Yeah, I just don't think the reason I asked it is I don't think that they're bad. I just think that they're not at a point yet where you can like build a real good list around them.
No. So if they weren't battle line, I probably would only play about 1 unit, and probably because the grots are just a better screen. They are a solid screen, but if you want screens, you want cheap. They're not cheap, but they're necessary, so you take them.
And that was my point. It was that if you want the screen in the chaff, you go the grots. If you want something to do some offense in melee, they're probably not there just yet, and you're just relying on the mortals from the poisons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gut Ripper damage output is horrendous. It is basically just the mortals.
Which is then, well, why do you have them over Hop-grots, where if you aren't doing the damage in melee, then really, like,
why
you look at that,
taking bodies that can stand there and be in the way.
Correct. That's literally the question behind my question, because I'm looking at that going, the hackers are 2 attacks, 4s and 3s, no rend for 1, or the stickers are 4s and 4s, no rend for 1. I'm like, why bother? Why bother?
And you take the stickers because you're a 32 mil unit also, so you can't reach over each other. So you just take the stickers and you hope you roll some 6s, and everything else is like, hey, I did an extra wound plus my mortals.
Yeah. It's maybe one day they'll be the offensive powerhouse that a Gut Ripper should be.
And Kruleboyz don't actually have any offensive buffs for any of their units besides the poison. So there's no real way to augment the damage output from Gut Rippers also. So there's no real reason to build into them either, because if you're just hoping to cast Hoarfrost, that's probably not a good plan for a expensive unit like this. Because if you reinforce them once, you're at 300 points. That's a huge chunk of change you're investing into maybe casting a spell to make good.
All right, I'll come back to Hoarfrost when we get the spell up on screen. I'm curious where you'd spend Hoarfrost because it's actually not a profile I'd want to spend on anywhere. Actually, like I'm looking at this going, even Hoarfrost can't save you. I'm sorry, Gut Readers. Like turning you into Reign 3 is not saving this unit.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk the battle tactic. Let's finally, and then we'll talk about the rules in 2023. The new battle tactic called Sneak Up. So you complete the battle tactic if at the end of the turn, every friendly Kruleboyz unit is within 3 inches of any terrain features and more than 3 inches from all enemy units. So is this good? When do you use it? Tell me more.
So this is amazing. This is actually probably one of the better changes they got because it's so flexible in when you want to use it. If you're losing, it is very easy to always pull everybody out of combat and go stand by a piece of terrain. It is also very easy turn 1 to get everybody near a piece of terrain. It's also very easy turn 2 to go get everybody near a piece of terrain. This tactic is very flexible. It'll be, as long as you're playing on a reasonable board, even if you're at a tournament or if you're at your friend's basement playing with 1 piece of terrain, obviously this is bad. But most tournaments have 8 pieces of terrain. You'll have no problem filling this in. It is amazing. They always struggled with 1 extra slot because surround and destroy is very difficult. You don't actually kill anything with magic most of the time, so magical mayhem is not very easy. You're always looking for that turn 1, turn 2 extra thing that you can do while you're jockeying for position. Again, you're very slow. So you're probably not going to be engaged turn 1 or turn 2. You're going to be positioning. You're going to be slowly moving up, getting a hold of the objectives, starting to cement your threat ranges in and lock them out. So this really, really fills in and helps for all those games where you jockey.
This is great. This is a really good one. And even in your most horrible matchups where you're against Seraphon, who's going to shut down your magic, you are up against a battle plan where you have no neutral territory and it's just yours and mine. Mm-hmm. You know, being able to get something outside of magical dominance, intimidate the invaders, or surround and destroy, you've got this up your sleeve as a turn 1, no risk. And then you continue on to much easier or much more battle tactics you want to use throughout the game as opposed to wasting. I love this.
Yeah, the big one, like you said, is Intimidate. Intimidate and Magical Dominance are the 2 that you usually look for. Intimidate's usually your easy one. Everybody loves Intimidate. It's very easy to do. Everybody can do it. Magical Dominance is a little bit more finicky. It depends on who you're playing, depends on what you have, whether you want to risk it or not. This is the perfect, I'm in between, and I'm just going to go with this and fill my slot.
This is an easy one. I love it. This, if I was playing Kruleboyz, this would be my turn 1 every time, and then let the game unfold and pick accordingly. Mm-hmm. So easy. So easy. Let's talk of Legion's abilities. So let's talk about your rules. Let's talk about what you're building into, what you like. We've already kind of gone over dirty tricks, unless there's anything else you'd want to talk about with the dirty tricks. I mean, the fact that you can now pick 2, which is great. We've talked about the benefits of Noisy Racket. We've talked about Disappear and Act, which is good. All of them are interesting in whatever matchups you might have. Anything else you talk about with the dirty tricks? Like, how do you... Actually, here's a question. Mm-hmm. How do you pick which ones you pick? Because unlike a choice on a, this is not like an army list construction, right? So no, every time I go, start again. So I rock up to a tournament. I'm playing Kruleboyz. I've got my opponent in front of me. How do you go through the process, or how do you help me pick better dirty tricks for them? Either the matchup, the battle plan, the opponent, the list construction. Like, what is it that goes through your head to prioritize your dirty tricks?
So I would recommend to everybody always take Noisy Racket, because even the best laid plans sometimes go awry. You might have to audible and do something weird turn 1, or your opponent might do something that you didn't expect turn 1. This is just a flat, it's going to hedge all your bets 100% of the time. Great pick. I would always do it. Whenever I haven't done it, I've usually regretted it.
Before you move on, is there any situations when you would not choose Noisy Racket as like a top choice?
I think exclusively maybe like a army that you know cannot get a hold of you turn one. Like there's 100% no chance. Like a night haunt maybe, where they're deployed off the board. There's no reason for them to go after you turn one. Um, no one's gonna risk a turn one play for you. Maybe Beastmen or Beasts of Chaos, if they've put everything off the board, they're probably not going to ambush turn one because they're going to wait for the Herdstone. Like there's a couple key situations, but in general, I don't think there's a single army that doesn't want to do some type of damage turn one, even if it's just chip damage, and this helps mitigate that. Maybe like a Fire Slayer's army that literally can't get to you turn one and you can't get to them. Like maybe that's the one exception.
Yeah, okay. So basically the decision point is I rock up to the table and I'm feeling confident that my opponent can't project power because this is both melee and shooting. So
Yes.
if they can't get me turn one, they're a slow moving zombie army. They are slow moving Fire Slayers. They don't have any teleport shenanigans, no coming in from ambush. If I feel pretty confident that I'm not going to be receiving any damage in this first turn, then I wouldn't pick Noisy Racket.
Yeah.
But in most situations, Noisy Racket is going to be a great choice.
Because even if you can't get hurt by them, it applies to your turn also. So if you want to send something in, it'll also hedge versus that. So if you want to send a Buzzard or a Gut Ripper in turn one to just kind of go clear off something safely, it protects you a little bit that way as well.
Cool. Okay. I just want to clear my head around decision points. So Noisy Racket, great. What are the other three? Like when I rock up to that table, and maybe I'm not as familiar with my opponent's armies, or I'm not as familiar with the game and the all of the stuff. How do I prioritize in my head which ones I go?
So I think Covered in Mud is the easiest to always do last. A lot of armies in this game actually don't have a lot of range damage, or if they do, it'll sometimes get around this, where it is the pure invisibility. If you are at range, you can't target. Some armies don't have any range. Seraphon gets around it. The Stormcast, when they drop in, get around this. So Covered in Mud is a very techie pick, and it's very specific because it's only going to be a couple of your things anyways. So you're going to have to be playing it very, very well to avoid making this kind of a bad choice or a wasted choice. I would say if you're playing big yellers with 9 Bolt Boys, that's the one time this would be a good pick because it protects that crucial unit just a little bit more to be in safety. You can't target monsters, you can't target heroes, so there's very few units that actually really love this, especially if you're playing Grinning Blades, you're just doubling down what you already have. And then if you're playing the 9 Bolt Boys, that's the one exception. So Covered in Mud, very specific, very reasonable to leave at home because it's very hard to play with and it's very hard to use effectively.
Cool. So if I rock up and there's not a lot of good cover on my table, or if I'm not really building around, as you said, the Bolt Boys, then Covered in Mud, not really a key priority for me.
Yeah. Lethal Surprise is always the middle one. Again, damage is really, really good. Doing mortals is really, really good, but you can't do anything to make your opponent trigger this. They get to see what you roll. They know how many things are trapped. If they are trapped, it's usually pretty easy to guess, and it's very easy to stay 1 inch away from a lot of terrain. A lot of terrain is impassable. A lot of terrain is not going to be wholly outside your opponent's deployment zone for a lot of these maps. It's very, very easy to avoid this unless it's very forced. If they have huge units, it's a little bit easier to trigger, but it's a little bit less effective. If I'm hitting 60 zombies with D6 mortals, who cares at the end of the day? And even the 36 squigs. If I hit 36 squigs with D6 mortals, I kill an extra squig or 2 if I'm really lucky. They're not too worried about that result.
Is there situations that you would pick this?
I would pick it most of the time if I don't have a good Disappearing Act target, and that'll be my next most likely picked one. Because if I don't have a good Disappearing Act target, this is just better than nothing. Covered in Mud sometimes does nothing. Disappearing Act also sometimes does nothing. This was a great second choice. So that'll lead into Disappearing Act. So Disappearing Act, I think, is my number 2 pick behind Noisy Racket. most games, because always picking up units to delay the game is again what you want to do. If I can just pick up two little units that my opponent has, that makes them take their turn one a little bit safer. If they were screens, they're not going to just start running up the board. If they were something very valuable, now they have to play on the back foot, and that'll give me a little bit more time to get into board position.
Are there any particular units that you like to choose more? So obviously we know that you can't pick a unit that has been reinforced. And we know that you need to, in order to be successful, you need to roll above the unit's wound characteristic. So anything with a high wound characteristic is obviously a lot harder. But what are your favorite types of choices?
So this is actually more dependent on the mission than the unit. If the mission is a mission with a huge deployment zone, I think you want to pick up things that are small that are going to grab objectives early, because it prevents them from grabbing that objective efficiently turn one if it's outside their deployment zone. In hindsight, if you have a very slow unit and a very small deployment zone, that's what I was trying to pick up. If something that will really, really hurt it if it doesn't move turn one. If I have like a 4-inch move unit of Ardboys, picking them up and not letting them leave their deployment zone turn one is a huge benefit, because they didn't get to move. I don't care if they're on the board or not, because I'm not going to get to them, and I'm not going to get to them effectively. So them just being off and wasting their turn of movement is crucial. This is a game of movement. At the end of the day, you win the game by standing on the circles. Not standing on circles really sucks.
All right. Cool. No, that makes sense, and it can throw people off, especially as we've talked about. There's a couple of battle tactics where my strategy might actually be run the idiots into combat, use bait and switch, get them out with a retreat. So by delaying that, or as you said, surround and destroy, that actually might stop me or delay me from doing that, and just making my life a little harder.
Yeah, it's all about just making it awkward. So if you have a unit that's obviously going to go do surround and destroy, just a little goblin unit or whatever, picking them up is like, oh, nope, you can't do that anymore. And now it's going to be weird for you on turn two. Do you want to still make them go do that? Do you want to waste the time? Just put them in the weird position. It's not going to like kill them. It's not going to completely throw them off. It just makes it weird. It makes it a little inopportune, makes it a little awkward. Just force those errors.
Yeah, and as we talked about as well, like shutting down castles a little bit by pulling out that juicy little unit that's protecting the. Although if they are reinforced, obviously throw that strategy out of the way. Venom encrusted weapons. So this ability is probably the leading ability when it comes to Kruleboyz, and the one that you're probably building around the most. And we've already talked about the shaman and the value of the shaman. But when you build a Kruleboyz list, are you thinking about volume of attacks to try to trigger as many venom encrusted weapons? Like, how do you think about this rule for list construction?
So I don't think volume is what we're going for here. I think unpredictability is my favorite thing about this. So everybody loves this rule. It's in every single army in some form or fashion. Everybody does mortals on sixes with something, basically something. There's always a scroll you can take where this is a rule. So everybody knows what this does. The beautiful part of this is when my opponents ask me, what's the average damage of Bolt Boys? The average damage of 6 Bolt Boys at long range is about 8. Now, each standard deviation is like plus or minus 8. So there's games where it's like, oh, I just did 20 with the same attack.
Yeah, like I don't think I've ever suffered 8 mortal wounds from venom encrusted. It's always like 16, 18, 24. Or like I think my dragons might have copped like 21 or 24 at some stage. Like, it's just like...
This is more about making it really scary. I'm going to roll 7 dice, and if I roll Yahtzee, your thing is dead.
And then what we've already alluded to, the fact that your shaman has the ability to pick a unit within 3 inches, boost that poison to turn it from 6s to 5. So if people are wondering how on earth you can do 24 mortal wounds from that, then all of a sudden, you that's very generous, incredibly generous.
Yeah, I always tell people, it's like, I can tell you the average, but you're going to sweat this result as much as I am, and we're going to find out what's alive at the end, or if I did nothing. Because there's plenty of games where you do 16, and then there's games where you do 2.
what's the right amount of Swamp Caller Shamans?
So I've been playing 3. This is another point that a lot of people disagree with me on. I think 2 is the consensus among everybody who plays Kruleboyz that you need 2. 2 is nice. 2 is safe. 2, you're always going to get good poison targets with 2. I play 3. I like the spells that are available to me, and I love having a third dude in my Antorian Acolytes battalion. I really like the safety of having one guy die and still getting that extra dice. So I play 3.
Yeah, the Antorian Acolytes, where possible, I always fill it with a third one, because the minute you lose one model from that Antorian Acolyte, you lose the battalion altogether and there's no benefit. But when you have 3, you lose one. And it can be quite hard to target these models because they would benefit from Lookout Sir. So as you're advancing up the board, you can be, avoiding targeting, and there's a whole bunch of things here. And to your point, if you lose one, having 2 more is great. The current season probably does reward you to have 3. 300 points for 3 wizards who can do the poisons and a spell is actually not a bad investment. Before that rule change where you had to choose poison or spell, I could see why you'd only do 1 or 2.
Yes.
But now that you can do both, I probably tend to agree with you. I think 3 might be the right number because you don't have a lot of other heroes that you want to have on the table.
And this is a huge GHB issue as well, where it's like I want an extra locus a lot of the time because maybe I'll score some extra points on Power Flux. Maybe I want them on Fountains. And then the Antorian Acolyte Battalion. So this all plays back into, I think, the season of the year is also a huge help for the army construction, and it leads you down that path. I think if we keep everything the same except let's go back to GHB 22, I think you would only play 2. And I think I'd be much more back on that train and slotting in maybe a different little 100-point unit, maybe an extra grot, maybe dropping the grots and getting 3 gut rippers instead of 2, or flexing somewhere there.
What about the Kruleboy War? By the way, thank you for that. I think, look, if you're someone who still wants to run 2, it's not a bad decision. If you run 3, I think it's not a bad decision. I think it depends on your personal preference and ultimately how you're constructing your list. And if you've already got 2K worth of points in your army, where's the 100 points come from, and what's the trade-off for that extra hero? But I would probably tend to agree with you. I think this is the right season to have multiple wizards.
Yeah. Everything plays into it, so it feels good, and you get all the benefits of it from right now. So I think it's a hard pill to swallow, spending 300 points on little support heroes, but you kind of need to, and it's not the roughest right now. You're getting a lot of benefit from doing it.
The points are right. If this was like in my Stormcast where I'm paying like 130, 150 points for a wizard, different story.
Yeah.
100 points, this is great. What about the Kruleboy War? Like, is this something that what benefits the most, or what do you do with this once per battle ability?
So this is another reason I really love my general to be the Vulture. The Vulture is a huge base. He's like a 5. He's one of the 100 mil circles. I think he's 100. No. He would be 130. Yes.
I thought. Oh no, because at Gargan's 130. He's sure.
Yeah, he's on the Gargan base.
He's on Gargan base.
Yeah, he's on the Gargan base. He's a big boy.
Wow.
So he's huge. So that with the 18 inches is a huge range to project the wall and make him plus 2 other units fight. There are a lot of times you do want to get in with multiple things, and it's a little bit awkward because you don't want to get hit. You hit really hard. You don't want to take wounds back. Every wound you take is really rough. So the Vulture being able to be fast, get into position to wall, and get 2 other units pretty easily to wall with him is really a big benefit, and I really enjoy it. Some people don't take models that can wall very easily. Some people just make a shaman their general, and that is just going to be the different type of gameplay style you want. Some people make the Sludge Raker the general. That's also very reasonable, but if you're going to do that, the Sludge Raker is very slow, and you're not always going to get him in. So this is kind of a more flavored choice. If you're going to take something fast, you're going to wall easier and better. If you're going to take something slow, less likely to happen, but it's still good.
Given that we've already talked about you not being the greatest melee army in the game, who are the units that you probably pick that would benefit the most to support that once per game? Is it like the Maya Brute? Is it a killer boss on Gnash Tooth? Is it your Gut Rippers?
So it's going to be whoever is fast or in combat. So the problem I've had is a lot of the Gut Rippers die. So you're not going to really benefit from the Gut Rippers doing it unless you're doing it on your turn. So it's usually going to be the Vultures. So Gobsprak plus whoever, because you're fast enough to get into position to do this. Even with 18 inches, it is still a little bit awkward because it is holy. So that's the big thing to push for. I think Nash, basically you're going to need a fasten on your general to really, really trigger this correctly. And if not, you only get one or two. That's fine. It's not the best ability, but it is very good in a pinch, and it's also explosive, which is what we want.
So it's not that you're building a strategy around like turn 2, I'm going to charge in, I'm going to activate the Kruleboyz War, and I've got these 3. It's not like you're setting up smashing and bashing for an Iron Jaws player. No. It's more that when the situation arises and you've got a couple of combats that you've either charged or been charged, you activate it, you do your thing, as opposed to a strategy.
This is a pocket tool that you want to have ready that can just explode. So my favorite thing, again, is the 2 Vultures. Really love this because I can do the extra move with the Vulture with the spell and with the Fasten. So if they both move 28 inches, and then they can both fight back-to-back. And that's a lot of damage that is very fast, very scalpel heavy, can get to where it needs to be. And if it's defensive, that's okay too. It's just probably not going to be as effective.
When you say double Vulture, you're talking about a killer boss on Vulture and Gobsprak, or you're not talking about 2 killer bosses?
No, Gobsprak with the killer boss.
Do you see a world where someone takes 2 killer bosses on Vulture?
I don't think so. Hero slots are very rough in Kruleboyz. You want to play 6 heroes. And monsters really, really struggle at that stage right now, where you kind of need bodies, not monsters right now. Killer bosses are okay. Maybe you would play a Gnash Tooth, but I don't think you would play 3 Vultures. 3 Vultures is way too much.
Yeah. I was alluding to just purely having 2 killer bosses on Vulture, no Gobsprak.
Oh, no Gobsprak?
That's rough. But in this season, it's just it's too hard not to take Gobsprak. Like, it's just a... Look, we've referred to Gobsprak many times. It's at the hour mark. I think at minimum we should probably talk about why we're massive fans of Gobsprak, and this season especially is like the season of Gobsprak. So,
and you've heard it from other people that play Big Law. There are a lot of Big Laws are just including Gobsprak, and that's their inclusion for Kruleboyz, and that's great. So Gobsprak is a 2-cast wizard that the crucial thing is once per game. He gets an extra dice to dispel. Really good. So basically he has an in-pocket primal for dispelling. But the biggest thing is when he dispels, if he dispels a spell, he does D3 mortals. And if he rolls a 10 or higher, unmodified, or not, I mean with modifiers, the modifiers count for primals, he does D6. Randomly killing a wizard that just cast a spell on a 14, then you rolled 5 dice and rolled a 16 and then rolled a 6, is like a completely change of game state that no one expects, and it's just so brutal. Having a Slan that sits back in the corner, or Croak. Actually, Slan not a good example because he's guarded by the Source Guard, but let's say Croak. Croak is off in the corner by himself. You stop a spell. You do 5 wounds to Croak. You're like, well, do you want to keep going? Do you want to risk one more spell? And actually, this applies to most little characters that can't bodyguard, where it's like, you just took 3. Do you want to take 3 more?
And that's where I was going to go to. Ignore the Croaks of the world and the Gashes of the world and the Marathis and the Alarials. Let's talk about all these Entorian acolytes running around with Hoarfrost and Merciless Blizzard. Majority of them have 5 to 6 wounds. They can't afford to be taking these mortal wounds. And as an opponent, it's a high risk, high reward. Is that if my Madcap Shaman or my Knight Incantor or my Battle Mage on foot tries to cast a spell, I don't really have a lot of pluses to cast or unbind. So if I use a primal dice, I'm putting myself in a position for a miscast or a primal miscast. And then I'm also putting myself in a position where if you unbind me, I'm going to take some damage. So it's damned if I do, damned if I don't. The risk is on me. And I can't afford some of that damage, especially if I'm trying to set up for Blizzard. Like, maybe I just don't cast that spell this turn, and you just try to target that Blizzard wizard and stop me from getting within 12.
Yeah. Most wizards, like you said, have 5 wounds. If you break it down that way, when you say, hey, if Gobsprak dispels you, a third of the time, they're going to die. Like, that is a really rough proposition when you're like, I might be down dice because of the Antorian Acolytes. If you don't have them, you're probably going to be down 1 or 2 dice. Like, that is really, really scary. And if you have a wound on you, maybe 2, then it's even more likely. Like, a 2 wound left wizard is never going to cast versus Gobsprak because you're like, I'm just going to die. Like, even if I get the spell, they have to roll terribly, and then I'm going to explode.
Well, it forces them to potentially use a heroic recovery to get that wizard back up to full. If they are in the Antorian Acolytes battalion and they've only got 2 wizards, that could shut down the whole of the battalion with the right amount of mortal wounds. Just imagining a world where turn 1, I have magical dominance. I not only fail my battle tactic because you've unbound me, but then you've killed my wizard in the process, like a double. I think it's a very real situation.
I found a lot of people just won't risk it because it's too valuable to lose a wizard that way, where that's such a momentum swing. And because of that, if you're going second, you've just locked up your primal dice to cast for yourself instead of now having to use them defensively. So that's a really big swing also.
The psychological threat that I wanted to call out, because for a lot of people, yes, don't at me like the War Singer from Seraphon has 9 wounds, and yeah, there's going to be case examples, but most of them are 5 or 6.
Well, even for the War Singer, if this is again where Gobsprak being a double caster is huge too. Let's say I just stop the first one and do 4, and now you're in range. Are you going to risk it?
Good call. Good call.
Chip damage adds up. So, like you said, now it makes them do a heroic recovery instead of getting a CP or something else. So,
or they don't cast at all, and that's also a win. So, the psychological threat, Gobsprak knowing the entire spell lore brings great utility to the army as well. There's just a lot of great things, and the points have gone down to 240 points. It's an absolute steal.
And he's fast, and he fights decently. He's got the poison. The mounts for Kruleboyz, only the Vulture and the Sledgeraker get the poison, but because of that, they fight pretty well.
And a 6-up ward. Not too bad. Gobsprak. Yeah. Gobsprak, I would not leave home without Gobsprak, if I'm being brutally honest.
Yep, and I think you've seen that with Reinforcement too, because a lot of people are allying him if you can, or you see him in the big wall. So
I've thought about it in a Gits list. I'm like, I could bring him and Scraggy. Like, I reckon there's a little friendship there, magical. Like, might be throwing the towel in a little bit against Seraphon, but outside of that, like, it's not a bad little ally.
Yeah.
Not a bad little ally. So they're your rules. We will talk about your sub-faction stuff in a second, and maybe like where you kind of stand and what we prefer. From a command trait perspective, let's just talk favorite picks. Are you taking something from the current season? Are you taking like Shaman of the Shield Land, or Eater of Magic, or are you sticking internally with something Kruleboyz?
So I think I have never considered anything outside super sneaky. I think this ability is probably one of the best command traits in the game. It's something that you use immediately. You're always using it, so you're always getting your value out of it. You know whether you're going first or second, so you can deploy it correctly either way. And it also helps so many missions where, let's say I need to go get that objective that's off in the corner. I can go teleport my Grots up turn 1. Let's say I'm playing Iron Jaws. I can teleport my Grots again to go stop Mighty Destroyers. Or not Mighty Destroyers. Yeah, Mighty Destroyers, the extra move. There's so many corner cases where teleporting a unit is super, super strong turn 1 because it can be done just enough to, again, screw up somebody's deployment. Gobsprak is also another beautiful model to do this with, because if they deploy outside 30, you can now put Gobsprak right at the 30 range from that little wizard, and now he cannot do magical dominance turn 1, and he has to cast under Gobsprak. That's really scary. So this has always been my pick. And 30 inches is a long range, so Gobsprak can be safe while doing this. You're grinning blades, so you're not visible outside 12. 30 inches, even for a very fast melee army, is a long way to go. So I would never take anything besides super sneaky. Retreat and charging your general is cool, but you're not going to be stuck in combat too often with this army, and even with your general. Your Kruleboyz, you die, or you're very fast and you're setting the engagement anyway. And then Egomaniac, I've seen, I'm not a fan. We've talked about this. Kruleboyz are too squishy, I think. So even though your wounds matter on your general, taking wounds at all is just bad. So Egomaniac shifting wounds just doesn't help. I've seen people take it on the Sledge Raker to make sure he stays alive, but you're sacrificing your dudes around you to do it, and it's just not worth it. Unless you're doing exactly grots, I don't think this is good. And the grots are not going to be standing next to your Sledge Raker.
What about if my shaman was the general and I want to protect my shaman general? Would Egomaniac be a decent choice?
I think if you have to take a shaman general, I think it's better to take either Eye of the Blizzard or Eater of Magic. I think in season at that point is probably better. Again, it's just like taking wounds in general is bad, and just shifting them to other units just doesn't feel good. It's only a 4-up bodyguard also, and you don't get a ward. So I just don't like Egomaniac unless there's some crazy unit that comes out that's way cheaper. I think this is a leave at home.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I don't know. It is a risk. It is a big risk putting your general as a 5-wound thing, especially around with Seraphon sniping heroes at the moment with all the mortal wounds. So it is a big risk. But I think to your point, Super Sneaky does give. Look, I love the psychological movement game shenanigans. I would probably agree with you that Super Sneaky would be the thing, whether it's getting some Bolt Boys in better range, whether it is getting Unbind potential, as you said, from Gobsprak, whether it's some other shenanigans with, a reposition if I'm low drops and my opponent has done something that I wasn't expecting, I can reshift that Killer Vulture or whatever.
It's just so much more flexible, and you're always going to use it because you use it immediately. So you'll get the value out of your command trait. Our generals aren't very important at the end of the day. A lot of the things are totems, so we have 18-inch range on command points anyway. They're really big. Or if it's something small, it's a little model that you don't care. Like, you're not going to base your game plan around a shaman general. If he dies, he dies. As Drago said in Rocky.
If he died, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
Yep.
What about those mount traits? You've referred to Fasten a few times, Legos.
So I've considered 2 of these. I think Weirden and Fasten are the best 2. So Weirden is kind of a more meta pick, I would say. If you're playing a lot of Seraphon, I think the 4-up ward versus Mortals from Spells is really nice because it prevents Comet, it prevents a lot of endless spells from just pounding on your general who you don't want to be taking wounds randomly. That one's a little bit more of a meta pick. Depends on what you're playing versus. I think Fasten is generally the best one. You want to be fast, you want to set the pace. It's always going to be good. A lot of people take it on the Sledge Raker to really make sure he gets into the position that they need him to. I put it on the bird because I really like shoving 2 birds into people at the end of the game when they least expect it.
What about Meanin for a Killer Vulture?
So I don't think Meanin is that great because when you rely on damage, I don't have the ability to do damage consistently. Adding an extra or making it a D6 instead of a D3 on a stomp is usually not going to help my game plan enough. And also, I usually only fight 1 or 2 times in combat. So you're only going to stomp 1 or 2 times. So that means you're probably only getting like 4 mortals if you're rolling pretty well off of this comparatively. So I just don't think it's worth it.
I called that out because people look at this and they'll look at damage, and everyone loves mortal wounds and they love damage. Mm-hmm. But also you've got enough mortal wounds that you don't need to worry about a little bit extra. If I'm Iron Jaws, where I'm all about rend and no mortals, I think Meanin definitely has a much better position. But when you have the mortals coming out of, like, you open up your pockets and then mortal wounds are just falling out, I don't know if you
finding 1 or 2 extra mortals on a stomp is not that important. And again, I don't want to be fighting every turn with my Kruleboy general. he will not. He's not built to live through the game. He's 14 wounds with the 4-up. Even the Sledge Raker is the same thing. We're not tanking armies here. Leadership is bad, so heroic leadership is not really on the table for consistency. So you're not healing much either. So every wound you take is just going to stick with you, and then you'll just die.
I think Loudon has some legs for the people who like to play techie, who want to leverage, as we've mentioned, the big base of the Vulture, the killer boss on Vulture. There could be something in Loudon, but I don't know if he'd be my number one pick.
Loudon is probably a little bit more interesting, but the other problem again is when you're playing Kruleboyz, you don't want to be fighting multiple things. You want to kill the thing you're hitting. So roaring more than one thing isn't really going to be that effective, and you're usually going to have multiple monsters because of the 2 vultures into the thing you want anyway. So you'll get a roar and you'll get a stomp.
Yeah, if the killer vulture was a save of 3+, and then I could finest our Mystic Shield, shoot it up the board, different story. But the fact that it's a save of 4-up, mind you, it is only 200 points, so it's but 4-up. Like, do I want to go into multiple rounds of combat or multiple units? Probably not. But I think there's some interesting legs in there, but I just don't think it'd be my top choice. Anything else on
Smelly? Smelly is bad. You're going to be the one charging most of the time, and then Toughen is also not that good. Again, we're probably getting hit really hard when we do get hit, and we don't really care about our bracket that much because we really only lose a little bit of damage and then movement. But if we're stuck in combat, we're not moving anyway.
I was trying to think of a world where I use Smellian, and it's pretty. I'm struggling to think about when I would use that.
I don't think any army in Destruction really uses this that well, to be fair. Maybe a Gnashtooth if you had an extra enhancement, but that is like barely it.
And if I had an extra enhancement, like, why am I picking an extra mount trait when I can pick an extra spell lore? I can pick an extra like triumph. I'm struggling.
We're really digging for that.
I can't justify it. I really can't justify it. What I am looking forward, though, is a justification on your sub-faction. So, came out the blocks, Big Yellers was the number one. Grin and Blades has started gaining popularity. I have seen some small amounts of lists coming out from Skullbugs, but it does feel like Big Yellers and Grin and Blades are the clear winners, and Skullbugs are competitive, but just not as good as the other two. Yeah. Am I wrong or am I right?
I would say Skullbugs is like by far the worst. I think if it's stacked, if it was roll a 6-up per unit, I think maybe that would be okay. I think just rolling a 6-up is not good enough. You have I guess, like enough -1 to hit on your Gut Rippers anyway. So Gut Rippers don't really benefit from this if they're already -1 to hit, because if they don't all attack, then you broke even. I think your other options are way better.
Can I pause you for a sec? So, let's think of a world in the future where Kruleboyz get some new models and some love. More than just an Underworld's Warband. What could be released that would make Skullbugs on par with Big Yellers and Grin and Blades? Is it the fact that the -1 doesn't stack to make it -2 and like, is it something inherently in the rules, or if something came in the rule set and like a new unit, would that change?
You would need a unit that is qualified as battle line. I think would be very interesting. So, like, let's say like Grots became battle line in Skullbugs, then we're talking. But as of right now, you have the other two. One gives you a conditional battle line, which is really important, and then the other one is just generally good, and it's easy to control because there's no thought or mention of it. It's just Grinning Blades are invisible outside 12. That's it. I don't have to roll. I don't have to do anything. And then, you would need a conditional battle line or some new unit to benefit from it.
Does Skullbugs have any conditional battle line?
No.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm just trying to think of a world where I would actually use Skullbugs, and I'm personally struggling.
I think again, if you had another unit, like let's say a new unit with this warband, let's say it was not unique, and we made them battle line and skullbugs. Then we're talking our grots. Like I said, I think grots becoming battle line purely and skullbugs would be kind of interesting because then we can run a lot of grots, and we're looking at a different type of list. But without opening up any of those routes, I don't see the reason to take this.
Yep, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, so skullbugs we've acknowledged, probably not the greatest choice right now. Let's talk the other two. So big yellers, obviously our big shooty type build. You have changes to Lookout Sir, which may or may not change the value of big yellers. Grin and Blades definitely has some great rules. Are they on par with each other, or do you think one is better than the other right now?
So I think they're actually equal. I think they are both just as good as the other one, and that's going to be dependent on you as the player to decide which one's better for you. I like Grinning Blades because the games that I play at a higher level, having that ability to turn off range or limit range is really, really game changing for people that put a lot of thought into their castle builds and just making it awkward. I want to make it as awkward for my opponent to make the play outside their comfort zone as I can. Big yellers will also do that, but the way they do that is they just kill you. So big yellers are probably going to be better for a more casual player. You get to play with battle line bolt boys, which is really, really good. Reinforcing them up to 9 is very, very good. I run 12 bolt boys and grinning blades, so just making them battle line is solid. Adding the
2 units of 6, or
I run 2 units of 6 because they can't be 9 in grinning blades.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Grinning Blades. Sorry, I heard unit of 12 and didn't connect Grinning Blades. Yes.
So you're playing them in both factions, but just making them battle line. Being battle line is better because now you can open up Maelstrom. You can open up more tactics. You can deny Grands if they're kill all the battle line. Law is now easier because they're battle line. They can get across the board. So there's a lot of bonuses to being battle line. But I think it's a personal choice. I just like Grinning Blades better.
Yeah, it's a good call actually, because when I look at these, I like both of them, and I think to your point, it is about play style. Like if you want something a bit more consistent, that you have a strategy that, turn 1, I built a 1-drop, so I'm going to give away the first turn. I'm going to go for the double from turn 1 to turn 2, use my extra 3-inch range to do blah, blah, blah. And I've got this plan worked out. Big yellers, awesome. It reminds me of that Lumineth Sentinel build, long strikes, bow snakes. It has a very projection of power castle type build. But if you're someone who wants to play, as you mentioned, the 5 games and adapt and tweak accordingly, I probably play to the list tech of the Grinning Blades a little more personally.
Mm-hmm. And the upside of big yellers is big yellers will always be useful. Grinning Blades won't always be useful. So there's a little bit more on the lean of big yellers also there. But there's also games where Grinning Blades is going to be insane. Let's say you play KO. Grinning Blades is by far the best faction trait you could ever ask for versus like KO. It is amazing. And that type of situation is just like OBR Null Myriad versus Seraphon, where it just completely changes the math on how the game goes.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I do think it's a meta choice. And, when Cities of Sigmar drops with their Fusiliers, there's been tweaks in Stormcast, so you might see more shooting Stormcast hit the table, more than they have ever before. You might start seeing Daughters of Cain hit the table. Like if you start seeing more and more shooting, because there's a lot more castles that are being built at the moment, and they are hard castles to crack. This is the perfect counter to their counter. Yep. So, and it does force the opponent to go, well, I've wasted one of my 5 shooting resources because I can't target you. As a shooting unit, I've got 5 chances to make the most of it. Long strikes with their long range and, the units that I've mentioned can project their power in turn 1. Mm-hmm. This shuts down one of my 5.
Yep. At minimum. It might shut down 2.
At minimum, yeah. Like if you are 1 or 2 drops and you just dictate the terms of battle, you could give away first turn, or that's a waste of a turn, or you take it, you don't move into their shooting ranges. Like there's so much great gameplay in this that it plays to the way I like to play Warhammer. Yeah, cool. All right, I like it. I like it a lot. I guess it ultimately determines what you want to build around, and yeah, I do like big yellows though. It's a sweet
I
rule
like
set.
both. I do like both.
There's no wrong answer. What is potentially a wrong answer is: are you building a list without a wizard? Are you leaving our shaman or gobsprak at home in order to take advantage of this rich nullstone adornment meta that we're currently in?
I think the answer is an easy no.
Why?
Because shamans are just too good. And I actually don't think. Well, you could build a list, which would be hilarious, is like 6 buzzards. You could play something like that, where maybe a nullstone is good, but like I'm. We only have so many units, and like 3 of them are wizards. So I don't think it's really a good idea.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like obviously you can, but should you? Probably not. I think you give away too much. Like
Yeah.
you haven't even brought the spell law up. You got a great spell law. You got great wizards. They're at a great price. I feel like you are not gaining enough from the nullstone adornments to mitigate the value you get from wizards.
This is actually a game state question. I've actually heard a lot of people say, in general, they'd rather take the arcane tome on a random dude to open up magical dominance turn 1 than to take a nullstone, just because of how important battle tactics are right now and how hard they are. That the nullstone is going to be less effective than getting a turn 1 battle tactic for free.
Unless you were corn, wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. Yeah, if these weren't once per battle, if they were like every battle round or like something a bit more consistent, I might reconsider this. But anyway, we spent too much time on this. Kruleboyz, no. Take wizards. Nullstone dormants, bad. Uh, what about your artifacts? Do you
So
pick something from here?
for artifacts, I think there's 2 in consideration. The eye biter ash is not very good. Again, we don't really care about the -1 to hit. That's conditional. Um, Having an item that does something only 2/3 of the time, and then only for 2/3 of the time of that time is -1 to hit, is just not good enough. Again, we don't want to really be in combat because we're not going to stick around anyway. Even with -1 to hit, most of our stuff's going to die. Um, Beast Killer Slop, uh, I don't I don't like playing things like this where it's like, oh yeah, 2 through 5 I do something, 1 I don't do anything, 6 I do something crazy. Every book has something like this, and no one almost ever plays it outside of a very casual game where we're trying to drink and have fun and do that roll dice hammer. But in a tournament, this is just too variable, and you're just not going to be able to use it.
I look at that artifact like I roll 1 mortal wound.
Yeah.
Because on a 2 to a 5, which is most likely, I'm going to roll 1 to 3 mortal wounds. Likely. Yeah, I might spike a 4 to a 6. Wonderful. But the risk tolerance in me reads that as a 1 to 3 mortals. I'm like, I'm not wasting my artifact for 3 mortal wounds.
Yeah. So the 2 that I like to take, and I currently only play the Pebble, mainly because it just helps shore up the good games against like KO and any type of shooting army, where I'm just like, this is the extra bit of insurance that'll make sure a shooting army with grinning blades is really, really hard for them to beat me. If I'm going to play a gunline versus gunline, this is my edge. You're only going to be able to shoot me the 1 turn when you're really close, and that turn is going to be backed up by the 5 board. The Spiker Seeds are also a good choice, but I don't think it's great in the meta right now. I think versus certain units, it's very, very good because when you get charged, it's a 5 per mortal per guy. We don't have a lot of horde clear, so this helps with a horde clear, but it's probably not going to be as good as the Pebble, even though the Pebble won't see a lot of use most games.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen the Spiker Seed being used. And, if you're playing up against a very heavy zombie build right now, like that's the big bad guy in your local scene, yeah, the Spiker Seed could work. Or if flagellants become really popular in cities, or there's some type of really hoardy type thing, you're worried about Squeak Herd, yeah, that could be an interesting option. But if I've only got one artifact, yeah, the Mork's Eye Pebble is just so good. It obviously and put Blizzard in. put Blizzard on this wizard, and you get within 12. Yeah, you can come at me. Now I'm gonna Blizzard you.
Yeah. So I think the Pebble is the easy choice, and we don't really benefit from any of the generics. Arcane Tome isn't really necessary. We have plenty of wizards with the Shamans now and Gobsprak. And then the other ones, a lot of the Kruleboy monsters that do fight have like 3 to 4 profiles. So Manicore Vial is very reduced in effectiveness.
Yeah, they're not that great.
Mm.
What about spell choices? If you were going to rank them favorite to least favorite, what's number one spell I'm taking?
So I take Choking Mist as the number one. Choking Mist is an insane spell. The 24-inch range and then the diameter of 12 inches, because the radius is 6, is a huge AoE, and it can really screw up a lot of people. Not being able to run turn 1 if they make you go, or if you go first, really slows down movement. -1 attack on all the profiles, also very good. It's just a great spell. It's a huge AoE, and it's a great spell to use. Sneaking Miasma is my second favorite spell. It is move a monster. We're playing buzzards. Buzzards are very fast. It shocks people how fast buzzards move when you could triple move your killer boss with the fasten and his normal move and this to go 42 inches. He literally gets across the board to anywhere you want if this goes off. And you could have been in the back right corner and end up in the top left corner. So I pair this usually as Gobsprak and your killer boss now get to do fasten, basically, and they can get to wherever you want. So moving 2 buzzards 28 inches in your movement phase, or across your movements, is a huge reposition that's very hard to account for. Lastly, Nasty Hex. Nasty Hex is amazing when it's useful. I don't take it on a Shaman. I only use it on Gobsprak. It's very hard to use just because of the short range. I have killed 2 Gotrix with it, which is hilarious. But I don't take it on a Shaman. I only take Choking Mist, Sneaky, and then I put Blizzard on, of course, because Blizzard is the best spell out of all of them, because Blizzard can randomly roll 19 mortals and just blow a unit up.
And you're not taking Nasty Hex, just to connect the dots for those people who might be wondering why. It would be because of the short range, but also because Gobsprak already knows all of the spells from the spell lore. So if you face up against an army that doesn't have a lot of wards, then it's a completely wasted spell from your Shaman. But by having it on Gobsprak, you pull it out when you need it.
Yep.
You focus on what's going to be great value all games, and that's going to be Miasma and Choking Mist.
And same with the Black Pit. Black Pit can sometimes be useful, but it's very conditional, and you have it in Gobsprak for those conditional times.
Yeah, so that'd be your horde clearer as well, right?
Well, it's only against armor, so it's not good versus zombies.
Oh, it's the opposite. I was just rereading the rules for each 6. Yes. So you're okay. So heavy armor. This is a good spell.
Yeah.
For hordes and zombies, terrible because they have save of 5 or 6, and that's hot trash.
Yeah. So it's very conditional. It's probably good versus like Ard Boys, maybe Steel Helms. So
you Stormcast. Yeah. Slaves to Darkness if they're running around with a bunch of warriors and things like that.
This is basically the last spell you would ever cast, but it's nice to have.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen the Black Pit being cast.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest,
I've probably cast it once a tournament. Is probably like where it falls, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm playing something very specific where this is better than Arcane Bolt. But most of the time, Arcane Bolt's going to be better.
So on average, out of 25 casting turns, you do it once.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah.
really good value.
Yeah.
But are they better than these ones, Hoarfrost, Rupture, or Blizzard? I'm going to go Rupture first, being the middle. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's pretend it doesn't exist. You're not running Kronspine, even though it's changed now, and Kronspines aren't that popular because of the change to Rupture. So would you take Rupture as a spell, being worried about endless spells and or Kronspines?
No.
If Kronspines got reintroduced like a new model or a significant points discount and you saw the meta rise again?
Yes. But I think you would see a natural balance of the meta with that, because if Kronspines come everywhere, then everywhere it takes Rupture, and then Kronspines disappear again. So you'll see an influx there. And that's not a Kruleboy thing, that's just a meta thing.
And you may just take Shaman of the Chilled Land as your command trait, not necessarily Rupture as a spell choice.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Blizzard. Let's talk Blizzard next, the most obvious of them. So 4d6 mortal wounds, you can't teleport anymore to cast it, or in the same sequence, that is. Do you like this? Do you need it? Or do you have enough mortal wounds from range that you don't need Blizzard because of your Bolt Boys?
So I think Blizzard is unfortunately too good right now because of the way it plays. You are a defensive army and you have range priority because of Grinning Blades and all the shooting. So Blizzard is great for Kruleboyz because people are usually going to come into you. Now, having said that, you don't always get to cast it. It takes a couple primal dice to do so. It's usually, again, it's probably like a cast every other game. And even then, you might not have a good target. It's usually going to be just I can do this. This is a lot of damage. I will do it. I take it because I don't think a third wizard spell from the Swampy lore is useful, but I don't cast it very often.
It's a psychological threat with Blizzard as well. I think, people will try to stop Blizzard and let people get up their other spells because they're putting their primals into this, so they're worried about the threat and don't try to unbind them. Do you need extra mortal wounds? No. Is it psychological stuff, especially coming in within 12? I think the challenge for you with Kruleboyz is, and I'll go back to my Gits example, is I have units of like 40 or 20 stabbers who can hold an objective. They can hold a pin, and then I can Blizzard you when you come in within 12.
Yeah.
Do you have the same resilience to be able to absorb a round of combat before you Blizzard? That's probably my question for you, Kruleboyz.
So no, but it alleviates the pressure on you. So when you lose a unit because you've gotten caught with Gut Rippers, for example, Gut Rippers will die. Cool. Or one or two live, whatever. That unit has been nuked. The ability to Blizzard the unit that just nuked you and still shoot at distance is a huge help. Is it necessary? No. But that option is always better than anything.
Yeah, fair. So you're not building a strategy around Blizzard, but certainly it's a good choice to have up your sleeve. Let's talk Hoarfrost. Favorite spell of the three?
Hoarfrost is terrible, I think, for Kruleboyz, unfortunately.
I was going to ask you, is it good for Kruleboyz? And where, if you were going to use it? Because Gut Rippers, I was hoping Gut Rippers would be a great example. It's not.
So this also falls on Kruleboy monsters have 4 profiles, usually per monster, or 3 or 4. So already Hoarfrost is diluted at that point. And then the only other melee unit we have is Gut Rippers. Gut Ripper profiles are horrible for Hoarfrost. Because of the mortal wound output we do, it naturally reduces the to-hit percentage. That reduces the to-wound percentage. And that also doesn't matter for Ren now because we're doing mortals. So every single thing that Hoarfrost buff is diluted naturally by being Kruleboyz. And we have a lot of multiple profiles. So Hoarfrost is just bad.
Yeah, I was looking at Slitters. The Pot-grot Slitters wouldn't work very well. As you've mentioned, the Gut Rippers wouldn't work very well. Would the Sludge Drake or the Killer Boss benefit at all much?
So that's the multiple profile problem where you're only buffing one profile. And it's just, again, it's going to be very diluted. You're only going to affect maybe 5 dice, 6 if you're really lucky with the Sludge Raker. And a roll for the Sludge Raker is sometimes just going to miss. So if you roll a 1 or a 2, yeah, you hit a wound on a 2 instead of a 3. Cool, you all out attacked or use a triumph. It's nice. But a lot of your dilution, because of your mortal wound output, you're just not getting good return on Hoarfrost.
One maybe good use, maybe the Breaker Boss on Maya Brute. Maybe if you put the on the Bident Goat. Sorry.
Well, the troll actually does benefit the most because he doesn't do poison. But that would be like the one exception.
Because the Ironbound club's already hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 2 for 3.
Yeah.
The Binding Goat is 5 attacks, 3s, no rend for 2. So
Mhm.
putting that to rend 3 or wound a wound characteristic of 2, 2s and 2s.
But you also do mortals with those attacks anyway. So
I'm trying. Yeah. Come on, Jacob. Give me a break. I'm trying to push
Yeah.
shit uphill. Like I'm trying.
Yeah.
Give me half credit.
Yeah, Hoarfrost is a reach for this army, unfortunately.
All right. So don't pick Hoarfrost. Maybe in the comment section, folks, you can tell me where it is more valuable. Or maybe, actually, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I was going to tell us in the comments if you actually think of something, because I'm genuinely struggling.
I'm struggling with anything.
Although, if you bring in allies, like if we're bringing in like stabbers, for example, maybe do that with a loon boss on foot. I've actually been enjoying it recently with a Mega Gargant. I've been allying in the Gatebreaker Mega Gargant, putting it on the flail attacks and
getting hit on 2s.
Whew. 2s and 2, like getting it down to some pretty sweet numbers. What about your grand strat? Are you going with something from the GHB? Are you going with War? Are you going with Crumpum? Or I just think of like some dancing kind of Crump.
So I've been playing Crump for a while, but I switched to War recently. I think either is a good choice. Me and my friend who plays this army a lot have been back and forth on this a lot. Crumpum is going to be good in the matchups where Wog is not. And Wog is going to be good in the matchups where Crumpum is not. So I think it's literally a 50-50 split. I think either is fine. Crumpum is going to play to the game style of I want to kill everything, and that's going to be terrible versus the armies that summon because it's almost not going to happen. Like you play versus zombies, there's no chance in hell you're going to kill 180 zombies with Kruleboyz. I think you literally can't even do that much damage, even if everything hit and they missed all their saves. Seraphon, all the Chaos factions, they'll summon a unit at the end of the game in the corner, and they'll be like, haha, your grand is gone. Whereas Wa would have been the easiest thing in the world because there's nothing there, and you just walk over. In the opposite end, when people are going to shove on you and everything's dying, Wa is very hard because now all my battle line's dead, maybe my general's tied up, but my opponent has like 1 or 2 units left, and I have 1 or 2 units left. And Crumpum would have been the easiest thing in the world because it's like, oh, I'm fighting. I want to fight. I want to kill you. So I'm right in between the two. I don't think there's a bad answer. I think it's going to be meta dependent, but those are the two I'm sticking with.
If you were going to a major tournament next month, so before cities, let's say the meta is settled, it is what it is, and you're going to a major tournament next month, are you picking War or are you picking Crumpum all?
Flipping a coin. We'll see how it lands.
All right, you fence sitter. I probably I look at Crumpum all, and I do think of summoning. I think of how hard it's going to be potentially to pull down and only have 3 or less than 3 units on the battlefield. Yeah, like under 3. And I think in some matchups that's incredibly tough. I don't know.
It is. It's just some games you're going to walk in and you're going to be like, I cannot do this one and I wish I had the other one. And it's going to be the exact opposite the next game. You're like, I am so glad I have this one and not the other one.
I wonder if it has to do with maybe your sub-faction. Would Crumpum all be better for Big Yellers and War be better for Grinning Blades?
So they both pair well because when you play War... with Big Yellers, now your Bolt Boys are battle line, so they can trigger the big Wa, or the Wa the Grand Strat. But now they also kill better, so you're also triggering Crumpum all easier there too.
I see the conundrum. I'm trying to help the folks who are listening to this going, oh, which one do I pick? Well, I have an expert here in Jacob Brendan, and no, he's a fence.
I would take Crumpum all because it is a lot easier to plan to kill as much as I can at the start of the game than to just get across the territory at the end of the game.
Thank you. What about your battle tactics? And let's not go through all of them. We'll be here for 10 years, but are there ones that stand out for you more than others? And for the benefits of folks at home, I have dropped a couple of the battle tactics from the Orruk Warclans book that you clearly can't score because you don't have an Iron Jaws unit, you don't have a Bone Splitters unit. This is not a big war discussion. So of the choices, are there ones that you use more than others? We've referred to Surround and Destroy. We've referred to Magical Mayhem. We've referred to please.
Everybody loves Intimidate. Intimidate's very easy. Intimidate is the gimme, I wouldn't say, for this GHB season. It's very easy to get out of your deployment zone. Boom. Everybody loves Intimidate. Reprisal is actually very good. Sacking your general to go kill something and then killing the thing that killed him. Pretty reasonable. Kruleboyz love that one. Endless Expiration, that's going to be totally dependent on your opponent. Cool, we'll get there if we get there. Dominance, you are a 5-cast army. You love Dominance. If you can deploy outside turn 1, you do it. And then that leads into your turn 2 of Sneak Up. If not, we'll figure it out. Mayhem is not very good for Kruleboyz. We don't have a lot of reliable big damage. Mayhem is basically, I need to Blizzard, and that's another reason you take Blizzard. Blizzard is a good killer. Everything else in Kruleboyz is not a good magic killer. Bait and Trap is pretty hard. We don't have enough units to actually do Bait and Trap effectively. Everything in combat was probably dead from last turn, and then getting out of combat is pretty rough. So Bait and Trap, not very good. Maelstrom's great. We love Maelstrom. You have huge monsters that love to charge and then be 3 inches away from one dude in another unit. Now we're tied up. And then you can charge with any of your battle line. We don't care if they die or not. We care about our monsters, tying stuff up. Surround and Destroy, we talked about a little bit. Surround and Destroy is the good one if you can do it. If you can't do it, there's no big deal. Surround is the luxury of the few. I would lean towards don't try it because it's going to be too hard in most games. And then the last 2, we talked about Sneak Up and a ton at the beginning. Sneak Up is amazing. It's a great filler. And then the last filler is Take That, You Suckers. Take That, You Suckers is another reason the Kruleboyz are so good, where it's just do 10 wounds and don't take 10. This is a very easy tactic. You do a lot of shooting, and again, you're setting the pace with your army. You're not grinding. So we're not trading 20 wounds for 10 wounds here. We are doing all the wounds. We're taking no wounds back. We do not want to be taking wounds. So you should always be able to do this with the shooting, or if you have a unit that goes and picks off on somebody. We have enough mortals. We should be built to always guarantee this.
Yeah, Take That, You Suckers seems like a great turn 1 or a turn 2, especially if you are going at the bottom of turn 1 when your opponent has moved up to the board. Pew, pew, pew. Do your 10 mortal wounds. You haven't taken any damage. Great.
Yeah. My usual ordering is try to look for Magical Dominance turn 1. That's a nice, easy one. We don't have to interact. We're on the back, and we move up. Turn 2 is going to be the Sneak Up. Again, we're not engaged yet. We're still just shooting. We're jockeying for position. Now we're covering all the objectives. We're still not engaged. Now we're into our Intimidate turn, our Take That, You Suckers turn, our Maelstrom turn, or a Reprisal on the later 2 turns if we're really in it already.
Thank you for that. I was actually going to ask you, did you have an average turn sequence? It's like you are thinking in my head. You know what I'm going to ask. So this is the benefits of being on the channel before you know where my head is thinking. And we're going to assume that Kragnos is not featuring in any of your lists, and we're not going to be using that particular battle tactic.
Only in Legend. That's what the shields are for.
What would it take to get Kragnos into a Kruleboyz list?
A lot. I don't think Kragnos meshes very well with the Kruleboyz. I don't think he pairs well with the units. We're not a very fast movement army, so charging the extra d6 doesn't matter as much. And if you were going to play monsters, I'd rather play ogres, because I'd rather play the Stonehorns, and do impacts. So our Kragnos and the Dad Bods are even better.
Yeah, and Kragnos has seen a significant reduction across the destruction meta anyway. Like, you don't really see Craggy at all. So obviously, if you love Craggy, you run Craggy to your heart's content. But it is filling a spot, a 700-point slot that you don't really need right now. All right, so let's talk you two lists, and then I have a bunch of questions from Discord of people, very keen enthusiasts of the Kruleboyz that want to hear some of your hot takes. So, list number one, we have the Swamp Boss Scumdrek. We have a Swamp Caller Shaman with Blizzard. We have a Shaman with Choking Mist. We have a Shaman with Sneaking Miasma. We have Gobsprak. We have a Kill Boss on a Vulture, which is the General. Super sneaky Mork's Eye Pebble and Fasten. We have the Pot-grot Slitters. We have two units of 10 Gut Rippers with the Wicked Stickers. I hate these names. I'm struggling. We have a unit of the Man-skewer Killbow. We have one endless spell, which is the Suffocating Grey Tide, and I have 2 units of 6 Man-skewer Boltboyz. I don't know why I've ordered it the way I've ordered it. It is wrapped up in a double battle regiment and Entoring Acolytes. Ignore that there's no or asterisks. Discord is funny, but just know that this is what, a 4-drop? 5-drop?
6 drops.
6 drops. 6 drop.
So each shaman is a drop, the Sledge Raker or any of the 3 monsters is a drop, and then you split it half and half, where it's 1 Gut Ripper, 1 Bolt Boy, and one of the other 2 things, the Killbow or the Slitters, and then the other half is in the other one.
Cool. So does that mean this is operating as like 2 different like lists where it's like you've got, one contingent which includes a Gut Ripper, a Bolt? You explain how this works and how you building around this list.
So as you deploy, you're going to have your monsters in the middle, and then you're going to have your 2 regiments on the outside, which is your 10 Gut Rippers and your 6 Bolt Boys behind them. Those 2 operate in 2 blocks, so they are going to be on your 2 sides, and then your stuff in the middle that explodes out. Because of that, you're going to deploy the same almost every game. Your Sledge Raker needs to cover everybody. It's a 12 holy. Pretty easy to deploy from there. The one flex is your Man-skewer Killbow can go off in the corner. Cool. It's not super important. The opponent hates it. It's going to be annoying. Same with the Pot-grot Slitters. They're going to be either your super sneaky, so they're going to redeploy anyway, or Gobsprak's going to get to redeploy also. The main thing with this army is the Acolytes usually go down first, and because of that, you're kind of locked in place. You usually know where your whole army is going to go. You would be a 1-drop if you could. So there's no surprises really coming out of your initial deployment.
So when you deploy, are you deploying on the line? Are you deploying as far back as possible, to maximize the Grit and Blades ability? Like, talk to me, visualize this for me on the table.
So I think we're always deploying on the line because we are slow. Again, we're only walking 5 inches, so we're trying to cover as much ground as we want. And because of the Gritting Blades ability, we've artificially reduced our visibility to our opponent. So we want to be as close as possible. We want to be like 12.1. 12.1 is the perfect distance to be. So we want to close that gap as much as we can.
So if you were to play, let's say, for example, Scooter's Piggy list, Piggy's coming forward at you, yep. Would you still drop on the line, or would you drop a little bit further back, still almost pre-measuring to work out the basic movement plus the 12? Although obviously you're not worried about his shooting, but that was...
Yeah, the example was game 5 at Nova. I was right on that line.
All right, that's a bad example. Like there's no cavalry pigs with shooting or peel squigs or something. I think my point is though, like, are you thinking about that 12-inch, my opponent moving and then trying to still stay outside of 12, or are you always on the line unless certain conditions?
I think we're always on the line because of our strong -1 to hit front line and -1 to wound turn 1. Our turn 1 is our most defensive, and because of that, we've disincentivized your opponent from coming at you turn 1. So now we want to cover as much ground as we can, so to get into position to set up that castle for turn 2 to be defensive.
And are you having your 2 battle regiments on flanks? Are you putting them like in the center of the board, but just kind of like on the left and the right? Like, how do you operate these 2 independent, basically monster Gut Rippers, Man-skewer Bolt Boys?
I would say centralized flanks. So you're probably about at the 33% mark and the 66% mark if we're looking at the table as a bar. We're right at the two middle points, and then going up like that, and then we're toggling to shift.
Cool. Yeah, just curious because like some people might think about that as being a flank unit. No, you're not using the flanks.
Mm-hmm.
You are center, but just
Yeah, they're on the flanks of your formation, but they're not on the flanks of the board.
Any other tricks about this list or what it does or what I need to know? Gravetide, great example of a horde clearer that you called that earlier, that one of the things you could probably lack a little.
Mm-hmm. Gravetide was a great inclusion because originally it was another 3-man unit of Boltboys for 120 on 10 points under, but a Killbow is just as good as 3 Boltboys if it shoots something that has 6 or more wounds, which a lot of people have. So even if it's a corpse guard, if it's a monster, it's even better. So the Killbow is going to break even with those 3 Boltboys most of the time, and now you get Gravetide on top of that to help you with those huge hordes of zombies or anything that's a big horde where you're not doing enough volume that you need to get a little bit more volume. There's your volume, or it's at least an option.
And we refer to zombies as well because they come in units of 20. So when you reinforce, they can be up to 60, while traditionally, like, most models only go up to 30s. But either way, if you need the volume of damage, Suffocating Gravetide is a great way to handle those particular. And you know what? You come up against elite army, doesn't matter. Cost you 30 points. Yep. Wasn't a big deal. Big movement. You can kind of manipulate the endless spell still to get value.
Yeah, and that's the upside of Gravetide. Even if it's not useful as damage, it is a huge base. It's a great blocker.
Yeah, it is a wonderful way to protect. If someone's going to try to attack your Man-skewer Boltboys, having that extra layer using the base, because while you can pass through an endless spell, you can't land on an endless spell. So by having it there, it can block charges.
Yeah.
Anything else about this list?
I think it's pretty cut and dry. I love it. It's probably my favorite list of 2023 so far.
Is this your Nova list?
This was the Nova list, yes.
Cool.
This was the 7-1 Nova list. Whew.
So we know it does well. The other list is a big yellows list. So crump them all. You've got a Shaman, which is the general with the Eater of Magic, Mork's Mighty Pebble, and the Sneaky Miasma. You've got a Shaman with Choking Mist, Shaman with Merciless Blizzard, Gobsprak. You've got a Swamp Boss Scumdrek. You've got 9 Man-skewer Boltboys times 2. Ignore the points, folks. It's not 120 points for 9. It's just the app is stupid. Times it by 3. It's 360 points. 2 units of 10 Gut Rippers. 2 units of singular Beast Skewer Killbows coming in at 2k on the nose. Same deal. Entorian Acolytes, double battle regiment. So similar concept. There's a lot of commonality, but there's obviously a lot of tweaks as well.
So similar concept. I think this is the much more aggressive version. If you want to play where you are all in and you are going to blast people off the board, you want to be very proactive, this is the better list for you because it has more range, so it's going to threaten people from farther. And it does way more damage because those 2 9-mans are way more effective than the 2 6-mans. The downside of this is it's a lot less flexible, like I said. You're also very vulnerable to other people. You don't have a lot of screens. You're very low wound count. Those Boltboys are 6-up saves with 2 wounds each. That's 18 wounds on the 6-up. That's nothing for 360 points. So you are going to play on Death's Door the entire game, but you do a lot of damage. So people really need to close that gap, and you need to prevent them from closing that gap.
You're really trying to make the most of the 27-inch shooting attack from the aimed shot, right?
Yep. You are going to blast people off the board with this army. But if they get a hold of you, they're going to manhandle you for the turn.
So why the Entorian Acolytes? Like, surely you'd want to go 2 drops or 1 drop with this type of list, right? To guarantee yourself who goes first, who goes second.
So I think magical dominance and magical power is much more important in this meta. I think those extra dice actually help more because, again, you have that natural turn 1 deterrent of the -1 to wound and the Gut Rippers up front. You are still a fine control list into turn 1 either way. You are happy going first. You're happy going second. If you go first, you get to shoot first. You do a lot of damage. We're deploying on the line again. We have a huge amount of range. And we want to be able to get our spells off. We want to be able to put up Boggy Mist. Boggy Mist was something we didn't cover. It's a lore spell that everyone knows. It's +1 to charge and -1 to charge. That changes the math on so many games. It is insane. Another win at Nova I had was against the captain, one of the co-captains of Team America, Noah Singe.
Noah Singh, yep.
He was playing Beastman. Making the Beastman go back to 9-inch charges instead of 8-inch charges on the deployment is like an 8% swing per die roll, and they're going to roll like 20 of those. That is a huge change for such a little spell that you really, really want to go off. So every time you get a spell, it's going to have a massive impact. Choking Mist is another one. Choking Mist going off is a huge impact. Not being able to run, even if they can run and charge, you're going to make them come across so much slower. Boggy Mist going off, -1 to charge, also a huge deal. So all these spells are massive, massive swings when you get them, so you want to make sure you get them. So I think it's okay to sacrifice the drop control for that.
Cool. So it's not like I need to completely obliterate my opponent in turn 1, and that's why you might be tempted to go battle regimen or double battle reg. You start, and I agree with you. I see real value in Entorian Acolytes. If my list can be created with it, I will always take it. I will take it over battle regimen every single day of the week. And in some lists, I will double down by going Command Entourage or Warlord to get the extra spell. So my wizards know 2 spells as opposed to 1. But I guess in this particular one, you are still a little squishy, so you still want to have the choice, and your build is a particular battle regimen build anyway. Like you want to drop a certain way.
Yeah, you can get the extra spells, but you have plenty of things to cast anyways. Because everyone knows Boggy Mist and Gobsprack knows everything, you're only really buying 3 extra spells, and you already have 2 of those spells in redundancy. So it's not as big a deal to get those extra spells. So I think Battle Reg is just the best thing out of what's left. There's nothing really else to take.
And because you don't need Hoarfrost in this list as well, it's probably another example where if Hoarfrost was more beneficial to you, different story.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else about this list? I like this. It's very heavy shooting.
Mm-hmm. It's very aggressive.
It's super aggressive, and if you don't pull off and you get, your opponent's going to punch you in the face if you don't punch them in the face. Not literally, please don't be violent to your opponent, but like you are really trying to cripple the opponent before they can get in. Take out that key piece, pull down those threats, those speed, the things that are going to hold objectives, cause multiple battle shocks across the board, and only 1 inspiring presence or whatever it might be. This is really trying to make the most of turn 1 to turn 2.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I think that's it. That was beautiful.
Simple and easy. Are we ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, hit me with the questions.
All right. So Discord was great, and they have thrown away a bunch of great questions for us. So I'm going to go from just top to bottom. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So what is the tastiest Kruleboy mini? This is coming from Moz. I'm going to pronounce this one. It's like, no. Tastiest Kruleboyz mini.
I actually want to say the new Warcry band is pretty cool looking. The little Pot-grot with the egg running around and the monkeys are really cool. The leader is really cool. But I want to say probably the second choice would be the commemorative series Swamp Color Shaman. I actually love that model so much. He's like the... He's got an eye on top of his head. He's got his little stick staff. I actually would love to have... I only have 1, unfortunately, but I would love to have 3 to run them as like the... oh, God, who's the Greek sirens? The Fates.
Yeah.
I think that would be hilarious. So
I like it. I'll say Gobsprack. I just love the Vulture. I
do love the Vultures. The Vultures are really cool.
Although I was going to say Pot-grot. Like shout out to Pot-grot or Monkey. Some hilarious models. Do you prefer the Dominion box sprues or the singular boxes you buy?
Singular boxes. I hate push-to-fit models. I always have, always will. They just don't have as much detail, in my opinion, because they don't come with the little bits and bobs that are in the kits, and they don't have the flexibility. So I'm not a huge modeler. I enjoy painting models, but I'm not a sculptor. So I always prefer the stuff that comes prepared for me.
How do you play games how do you play the game to mitigate against the inherent fragility of Kruleboyz?
So I think understanding your limits of turn one and your game plan is really important. Um, Understanding you are not going to be tabling people. You are not a tabling army. You do a lot of damage, but you're not tabling people. Understanding that is a huge part of getting the Kruleboy success. Even with that big yellow army, your goal is not to table them turn one, it is to cripple them and then keep crippling them every turn.
How do you feel about making a killer boss on foot or the Merc Knob and Entorian Locust with the Arcane Tome?
I just don't like the two melee characters. I don't think they have enough utility. The bonk ability is on the Vulture, where you bonk a unit and only one guy runs from Bravery. The 3 inches is nice with the huge base. It's really hard with the small guy, so I'm just not really a fan. Even though they're really cheap, it's just too hard to utilize them, I think.
What rules support do you think Kruleboyz need in order to play a monster melee focus game, which is what they would love to see with the amount of monsters that you have in Kruleboyz? And we talked about whether it's the Maya Brood. There's so you do have a lot of monsters, and it feels ineffective really if you build around them right now.
So I think the problem there is the character slots. I have 6 characters in my main Nova list. You're just limited by character slots. You can't fit all these monsters and the shamans to support them. You don't have buff pieces that are outside characters. Everything's a character. So I think you would need to see units that buff to support those monsters that aren't characters.
So almost like a monster. A monster hero, but not a monster leader.
Yes. Yep. Or like a Gobblepalooza style thing, where it's like a buff unit that doesn't take a hero slot from you. Or the what are the 5-up ward dudes? I don't remember the name of them.
The Sneaky Snufflers.
The Sneaky Snufflers, yeah. Something like that, where you're not taking away those crucial hero spots, because you need them for your monsters if you're going to play Monster Mash. And you need your shamans to give out the poison for your monsters. So now we're at 5 characters already. And we have to fill battle line. So maybe actually that would be a good thing. So battle line conditionality on your monsters would actually be a good thing. Maybe something toast or something like that.
Like the Skullbugs, if they made some monster type build, yeah, okay, like the Sludge Draker or some type of I mean, you can do Magma Droth builds in Fire Slayers. Like, why can't you do a Swampy type one? Maybe it's an Army of Renown coming soon to you, Games Workshop. Make it happen. What am I up to now? How do you manage damage variance in an army where you inevitably roll low?
So you always hope for average, and you're always pleasantly surprised when you roll more, and then you're trying to compensate when you roll low. Kruleboyz is probably just not the army for you if you can't handle the turn where you do nothing. Like, it's going to happen. Like, one of those tournaments, you're going to have a round where you're like, I did 2 mortals. I rolled a 6 and then a 5 with my 28 dice. Like, it happens, but it happens to everybody. So,
how do you build a list without Gobsprak? He isn't necessarily good in every matchup, so what's a list look like without him? So, let's say, for example, let's say, for example, I'm playing a lot of store games and my local bad guy is a Khorne player. Mm-hmm. So and clearly not of them. Yeah, like Gobsprak is completely wasted there. So how would you respond to that?
I think you honestly, sadly, is just to another 6-man unit of Bolt Boys because they're the exact same cost. So it slots in perfectly. It's just, again, this is the shallowness of the Kruleboy roster kind of hurting you, where you only have those 6 hero slots. So yeah, you're taking out a hero, but like you're not going to put in more wizards. You can maybe play 2 Nashtus, but now we're taking 2 slots. So it's probably going to be 6 Bolt Boys.
Or you swap it out for Kill Boss Vulture if you haven't got one. If you haven't got one, you swap out the role. But I think to your point, yeah, I would probably just go more Bolt Boys or the Man-skewer bows. Mm-hmm. I would tend to agree with that one. Opinions on allying an Arachnarok for a 1-drop battle regiment. So Arachnarok coming in from the Gits book.
So somebody played that versus me. I think it's good. I don't think it's necessary because the way the Kruleboyz play, you're kind of forcing people off primary objectives by moving forward. So snatching primaries in the back of the field is not really part of the game plan because you start stretching yourself too thin. You don't really have any anvils to break upon besides your turn one just debuffs. So I don't think it's okay. The Ragnarok is also unfortunately huge. So if people are staying away from you to not get shot, they're naturally kind of screening you out of dropping in. So I think they just kind of pair poorly.
What are your thoughts around a minimum size unit build for Bolt Boy? So let's say you're running 12 in one of your lists. Let's split them out into units of 3. Is that a good idea, or what am I losing by splitting them out from blocks of 3 to 6s? So 6s to 3s.
So I ran through that math earlier. I think if you're playing 3s, I think you're better off taking a killer bow and then having the extra points because the kill bow does the same damage on average versus something that has 6 more wounds. It's a little bit more variance, right? But I think that is better overall. The problem with the Bolt Boys is they lose a lot of effectiveness when they start breaking down to 3s. They are very nice because you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to think about them. They're off in the corner shooting, doing what they do. But you really want to maximize your shaman potential. And MSU is not really the Kruleboy thing. You're very light, and you don't fight too well on the flanks. So, like, if your 3 Bolt Boys get caught by any other unit, they're probably dead. It's 6 wounds with a 6 up. Even a chaff unit is going to probably kill you, or you'll have 1 guy left, and now you don't do anything. You're too wound point dense to make that really work, and you really want to keep them alive or centralized.
Yeah, they don't work for me as solo operators. If they can be on the flank, let's say they were like the ogre hunter, where they can't be targeted in terrain and like they got some sneaky movement. Sure, but
I think the problem is now what are you gaining by breaking them up into singles? And I don't think you really gain anything. So
agreed. 3 last questions. For someone who is new to the army or wants to stay cost conscious, how would you recommend starting to collect an army, especially with the more common staple units like Bolt Boys we keep referring to?
So Dominion boxes are a great thing. They're a dime a dozen at this point. They came out. A lot of people bought them. I think you can find pretty cheap Kruleboyz on eBay or elsewhere, or you can always talk to a friend and be like, hey, if you want to get into this game, you take the Stormcast, I'll take the Kruleboyz. They came with 10 Gut Rippers and 3 Bolt Boys, I believe, and then plus a handful of characters. I believe a Shaman, a Gnashtooth, and the Banner guy, I believe is what the box was. So, and then you can work it up from there.
Yeah, the local buy and sells on my community, people are selling Kruleboyz so cheap. So it's a great way to start and then build up and get yourself a Gobsprat, get yourself a couple of those other things that don't sit in the Dominion box.
Yeah. They also had a Christmas box, which is great value. It was a Sludge Raker, a bird, 10 Gut Rippers, I believe 6 Bolt Boys, and I think that was it. Oh, a bow, and it was a Beast Killer bow. And that, I believe, was like $240, and that is great value for those kits. Those kits are all basically 20% off if you buy it that way.
The Army of Renown box as well. If you see the Army of Renown box, if you want the Man-skewer bows and a couple of the Bolt Boys, like that's a great way as well.
You should never buy single Bolt Boys. You should always buy the Army of Renown because you get 6 Bolt Boys and a Beast-skewer for $60 instead of 3 Bolt Boys for $45.
Just don't come to my local store, folks, because I think I'm going to go buy one now after this chat.
Yeah, and it's great in other armies.
That's literally what I'm thinking. I'm sold for gits. I'm like 80 points. This is hot.
Yeah.
All right. Last question, and then you can kind of wrap us up. It's the most important question, actually, I can probably ask you. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
We haven't covered this yet, so I hope you're ready.
I don't even know what it could be.
What was your most insane snatch and grab using by the Snatcher boss?
That's a great point. It was actually the game I lost. Null Myriad OBR with those 6 Immortus has that stupid little savant bone shaper running around. You know what gets around all those bodyguards? Getting put in the bag. And it was so great. He said, I have all these 6 dudes standing around me, and he's just getting scooped up.
That's so funny. That's so funny. It's such a great rule. I love it so much.
That's actually another reason I play the named character versus the other one. He does it on greater than or equal to. The non-named one is just greater. And he gets an extra wound. So.
And you don't need to customize it anyway, though. There's actually very little benefit to customizing.
The dude has a different weapon. That's the only difference. So,
but you're not going to chuck down like your artifact, your command trait. You're not going to be chucking all your resources onto it. So, yeah, why not go the unique one? Jacob, this has been awesome. Actually, final question, real final question. If you got to actually add something to Kruleboyz, what would you add? So you were the decision maker.
I would love to have another medium melee unit. I don't think we need more shooting. I want something that's kind of like the Skaven Gutter Runners, but a melee assassin unit. I think that would be really cool. Something that can ambush or come in hidden or like pop out of terrain. I think like almost like the Arnold and the Predator movie where they're like, oh, I was covered in mud and now I'm here. Like something like that. They can be squishy. They can be very offensive, but very like die very easily. Something like that I think would be really, really cool and in flavor.
I like it. I'll support that. I think you are at risk of becoming like the Destruction KO. You don't want to be this one optimized build where KO is either great or it's garbage. Like there's no middle ground, and because there's no flexibility in KO. I do worry that without a lot of good melee options, you do become one-dimensional, and you saw that with the big yellers, especially very early on.
I would love a unit that had that role. Basically, you pick a piece of terrain at the start of the game, kind of like we do the traps. And at the combat phase, they can pop out like anywhere within 3, even in combat. I think that would be awesome. And it would be in flavor. Like the covered in mud dudes or whatever.
I wouldn't mind like some troll, like Troggoths. You know, you've obviously got the Maya Brute, but what if you had like the Dankhold Troggoth or the Fellwater Troggoth equivalent for you? So this durable little 3-person unit that that advances up the board, you know, because you've got your Dankhold Trog boss and you've got the Troggoths to support. What about the Maya Brute? Like, give the Maya Brute something to work with as a little anvil and hammer kind of style, and
something medium. I'm trying to think of a swampy. They have the Fellwaters already, so that's really swampy. So I'm trying to think of like a swampy medium monster, almost like the I know they discontinued them, but the Fimirs. I believe the Fimirs were like mist. They were like mist more oriented.
We don't talk about Fimirs. We don't talk about their lore. Their lore. Yeah. You are a little bit not politically correct for these days. But that also works with Archaon. If you go back to Archaon's lore and see how that originally started, but that's certainly changed. But yeah, like some Troggoths kind of. So dial it up to 11, make it all swampy, make it all alligatory or something. That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, almost like the Croxigors, something kind of like that.
Okay. Yeah, we're on the same vein here. Some Croxigor, Troggoths. Sign me up.
Or even a snake. A snake would be interesting, like an anaconda.
I reckon snakes are daughters. They won't touch that, but. Like a crocodile, like the Necromunda crocodile. I don't know how you bring the crocodiles into the picture, but I don't know.
Yeah.
People in the chat will tell us what they want. But where can people find you, Jacob? Are you on the internet? Are you playing around locally? Do you have any shout outs to the bottom table bullies? Or
shout out to the bottom table bullies. I'm based on the East Coast in the nation's capital, so DC. I play most of the East Coast. Shout out to Team America. Shout out to the Bottom Table Boys. Shout out to Tough Crowd. I think I love the American scene. It's so much different than it was in fantasy. We're much more of a family. Please come play with us. We'll teach you. We'll coach you. We'll do whatever. We love playing. We love bullying people into being our new best friend. So.
I've had the pleasure of hanging out with many of you in the past, and yeah, you guys have a great culture, a really good culture. I've grown to appreciate it after LVO. Jacob, thank you for your time, and you are in my Discord, by the way. If are you on Twitter or X or anywhere else?
I'm kind of on Twitter. I'm more in Discord. I'm Azrael in Discord, so AZRAEL. I'm on and off. If you talk to me individually, I'll usually respond, but I'm not like floating around as much. But I'm around.
Busy man, but thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all of your great insights. I hope Kruleboy players, you're feeling a bit of love, that you're getting some ideas around how you can make the most of the current season. Maybe you are someone that was always running 2 shamans that now has been triggered to run a 3rd. Maybe there is something that we've discussed that maybe is getting you to think a bit more about gritting blades over the big yellows. Either way, I think, we've had a pretty good discussion, and who knows if that Warcry warband's going to be any good, or if there's any Army of Renown stuff coming in, like Book 4, Book 5, Book 11 of Dawnbringers. Who knows what's coming down the line?
Yeah, it's always a lot of open work to be done. Kruleboyz got a lot of love. They're the newest army, I believe they're the newest army. Giants came before them, I think. I'm seeing that now.
No.
It's been a long time. Did Giants come out after?
Gargans came in 2nd edition.
Yes. So
pretty sure. So Kruleboyz is the newest army.
Newest army. Yep. Got to get some love.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Kruleboyz get a brand new book for 4th edition when it eventually happens, and I wouldn't be surprised if Games Workshop supercharge it, because they have put a lot of time and love into the army, and it's probably not performing the way they wanted it to. And who knows what's coming down the line. But Jacob, that's a completely different discussion. You want to go to bed. I want to go do some things. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the chat. And you know what to do here. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know what you thought. And if you want to continue the conversation, the Discord link is down below. Come chat Kruleboyz with us. We have a specialized chat ready specifically for Kruleboyz and all the other factions as well. But Jacob, again, thank you for your time. And I'll chat to you all later. See you. Bye.
See you.
Bye. Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.